across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is indeed Talk, the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I'm never quite sure where I'm sitting. If you don't watch us on YouTube or your connected device, instead you're listening on DB Plus radio or your smart speaker, I may just be a little face because I seem to be wearing the same colour jacket, blue, as my background. So I may just completely disappear at some point and looking like I'm green screening. But no, I am actually fully here. I do promise you that. But yeah, if you've not had a look at our YouTube, you know what? We scrub up in the morning, especially for you. So do take a look. If you do miss anything from the show, if you're listening but you want to have a look at our YouTube page, you can see us all in the visuals. My cunningly named Julia Hartley-Brewer show is easily available for you to find. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss anything. Coming up in this hour, we're going to discuss how you've got, Labour Defence Secretary, as we discussed on the show yesterday, George Robertson, urging Keir Starmer to slash Britain's ever-expanding welfare bill to boost defence spending, as the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, hits out at Donald Trump's folly in his decision to go to war against Iran without a clear exit plan, which may or may not be a fair point to make, Rachel Reeves, but is it a good idea to make it in a national newspaper, The Mirror, the day before you arrive in Washington for a meeting with the IMF and the Treasury Secretary and others, where you are basically grovelling around trying to save the British economy? Maybe not a good idea, I expect, if and when Donald Trump finds out who Rachel Reeves is. He's one of the luckiest people on the planet. He doesn't know who she is, probably. He's going to give her a damn good roasting. And how's that going to help the so-called special relationship? Rach? Anyway, turns out that her abacus really is broken because, according to the International Monetary Fund, Britain faces the biggest economic shock of the G7 countries this year. Why? Tell you why. It's really, really simple. It's because we rely on imports for so many of our fossil fuel needs. Oh yes, and because of the budgets by Rachel Reeves, which have put up taxes, particularly on jobs. So yeah, well done, everybody. It's not the Iran war per se. It is our economic policies run by the people that we sometimes foolishly elect who are putting us in this position. Plus, we are also going to talk about how the NHS has, according to a new report, an appalling culture of medical misogyny. It's failing women and girls, apparently. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Delighted to say joining me for all the chat today is Claire Pearsall, former Conservative Government Advisor. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm going to find myself an awful lot of the times during this next 3 hours saying, well, your lot did this too. So just assume that whenever we're talking about everything, well, your lot did this too. Including when we get to it, the story about these 10,000 migrants moved out of hotels. Yay! Into communities. Boo. I mean, they're still here. We're still paying for them, folks. And the good news just keeps on coming. Look, let's start with this IMF report. International Monetary Fund issued their growth forecast for the world, and we are basically the most downgraded. We're going to get the biggest economic shock of the G7 countries. So these are the biggest countries. Basically, all the European countries doing really badly. The big oil exporters and fossil fuel exporters, America and Canada, doing just fine, thank you very much. They're also downgraded, but from a much higher level. Either way, we were only predicted to have 1.3% growth, which it's all but flatlining, guys, in the next year. But over this year, it's been downgraded to 0.8%. The worrying thing about this, though, is not just the reasons why, but the fact that this is based on a pretty optimistic view about the war being short-lived, ending in the next few weeks, the Strait of Hormuz being reopened, we all go back to normal. I mean, fingers crossed, yeah? But let's face it, even when things don't change, the IMF's, as with all forecasts from economic bodies, are always wrong. I mean, always. Yep. They always have to change them. But crucially, they say, look, the conflict in the Middle East has triggered risk triggering a global recession. This is all down to, the Iran conflict. But reason why we are so heavily hit is because we are highly reliant on gas for our energy mix, and we import so much of it, and we import it at market prices. Yeah, because liquefied natural gas, we import at a more expensive price than, I don't know, plucking an idea from thin air, importing it in a gas line from the North Sea from our own gas drilling. I'm just throwing that out there as an idea. And also putting up taxes on employing people. Claire, I mean, this is an absolute disaster.
Well, it really is. When you look at, we import, was it 43.8% of our total energy needs. That's an import coming into this country, which is going to cost us inordinate amounts of money. And that's why you've seen such a downgrading, our dependence on energy imports and our sensitivity to the market prices. So that makes us so dependent upon what goes on in other countries and the supply chains and everything else, when we have a solution, as you've just alluded to, that we're not touching.
But the Energy Secretary, Med Miliband, and indeed the Chancellor and everyone else who comes out to speak, they've made it very, very clear that if we were drilling in the North Sea for more oil and gas, and we will add new licences, you know, jackdaw gas, etc., that we would still face international prices. It wouldn't make any difference. How come it's different for every other country?
Well, it wouldn't. I'd love to know the answer to that.
They're literally making this stuff up, aren't they?
I just want to hit my head against the table every time I get into a conversation with somebody and they draw out that line as if
I want to
it's
hit
some
Miliband's head against the table. Sorry.
Well,
but I do.
You can say that. I thought I'd be a little bit more measured.
But I mean, I don't mean it literally for all the fender trunks out there, but I'm just, you know.
But that's always used as the excuse, and it isn't the excuse. You can use that in your own country, but also if you do sell any of that, then you're going to sell it out onto the market and therefore get revenue into the treasury.
You get taxes. You get taxes on this. I mean, it is. James Murray has been the minister who's been out and about today, a Treasury minister, and again pointing out, you know, this is why we need to be more energy independent, which is why we need to carry on with our nuclear programme. Yeah, I'm all in favour of that. There's one sensible thing they've got, but by the way, they take a while to build. By the way, they take 3 times longer and 3 times more expensive to build in Britain than anywhere else in the world, because we haven't built any for so long, because we have no expertise, etc., and we need to focus on renewables. Your renewables are sod all use if you want to build an aircraft carrier or you want to build make concrete and things like. I mean, on a technicality, you know, you can use, you know, non-virgin still. Guys, in a wartime situation, that ain't going to be available. We are living in cloud cuckoo land. Now, we had a wake-up call, did we not, from George Robertson. Again, we don't. No one listening to this station needs a wake-up call, because we've been yapping on about this for best part of 10 years. But basically saying we cannot have a ballooning welfare state spending 5 times plus more on welfare than we do on defence. Bearing in mind, Lord Robertson is a former Labour Defence Secretary. He's so trusted by Keir Starmer, he co-wrote the Strategic Defence Review for the government last year. And he's a former NATO Secretary General. I say, going out on a limb, I'm pretty sure he knows what the hell he's talking about more than Ed Miliband or Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer. And he basically says we've got to be spending more right now, 28 billion over the next few years. Rachel Reeves apparently has only agreed to an extra 10 billion, if that, in extra defence spending over 4 years. So 2.5 billion a year. That's barely above inflation. Okay, and I have a funny feeling that in wartime, military costs go up rather more than inflation. But actually this year, and in this tax year, the Defence Department has been told they need to find £3.5 billion in cuts.
Yeah.
What, I mean, the word insane does not do justice to the madness of what's going on in this country.
Well, it really doesn't. Isn't it interesting, though, how many senior Labour figures are coming out and saying your welfare bill is too high, defence spending is not enough, what are you doing? And more voices of people who really do know what they're talking about are coming out. But, I mean, defence spending, I lose track how many conversations you and I have had about the need for better defence of this country, better defence spending. And what are we doing at the moment? We'll come on to the story about moving migrants out of hotels and into disused army barracks. I mean, we don't have many of those to begin with. And aren't we going to need those if we're going to increase the amount of troops that we have in the country, which is another promise from Keir Starmer. So I lose track now at the moment of how many promises he's made, how many U-turns he's made. It's all such a mess, and we can't even get the oil out of one of our oil fields.
I know, exactly. And in terms of defence spending, I pointed this out on the show yesterday, even in 1938, when Neville Chamberlain was waving pieces of paper, peace in our time, when he was dealing with the threat from Nazi Germany. And by the way, there's not a single person who knows what they're talking about in terms of defence and security. He doesn't say we are facing a serious threat. There's a reason why Russia is mapping where our undersea cables are, where our pipelines are. By the way, virtually all of our imported gas comes via one pipeline. We've got 2 or 3 major cables which bring our electricity that we import as well. And then we've got all these communication cables which are vital for every single aspect of a modern economy. Forget a few phone lines going down. You won't be able to get money from the bank. There won't be any delivery. There won't be any records of anything. The whole country grinds to a halt. Get some tins of beans is all I can say. Get some tins of beans and some candles and torches with batteries in your cupboards right now, because this is not an implausible thing to happen. But even when Chamberlain was trying to get peace in our time, the spending of defence as a percentage of our GDP was over 8%.
Yes.
Was over 8%. No one's even dreaming about spending that right now. And that was in peacetime. Get to grips with how much more we need to spend. And he's quite right, isn't he, Robertson, that, you know, you can't spend 5 times as much on welfare. And a huge amount of that welfare bill is pensions. We've still got the triple op, big debates over that. But also a growing amount of that is working age people. I mean, my view is I'd rather be tackling the working age issue rather sooner. And genuinely, people can't work. People will be destitute on the streets. When they're hungry enough, they'll work.
Well,
I'm sorry, they will.
But we're also not talking about taking benefits away from those who absolutely need it. So if you have a severe disability that leaves you unable to work, we are not looking to take that security net away from you. But what we are looking at, those individuals who are a little bit anxious about the day, leaving the house and everything else, well, OK, you might be a bit anxious, but how about getting up, getting a job, finding a routine and doing all of that? So many people that we pay disability benefits for mental health cases don't actually need that.
No, exactly. And again, the people who are just openly swinging the lead. It's absolutely fascinating, by the way, that the BBC has discovered, I mean, I'm mind blown by this, because I think it does make them far-right bigots, that apparently not everyone who comes to this country to claim asylum is actually legitimate. I know. Yeah. I mean, it's a complete surprise to all of us, is it not? But a shadow industry of law firms and advisors is charging thousands of pounds to help migrants pretend to be gay in order to stay in the UK. I mean, you'd think that was quite an easy thing to do, but apparently when you go to your asylum hearing, you need to produce a load of evidence of having gone to gay nightclubs and been a member of organisations and gone to a parade or two. I mean, I've gone to gay nightclubs. I don't think that makes me gay, but there we are. Just rather good fun music sometimes. But often it is migrants who've come here to work. Their visas have run out, and so they get a fake cover story and they're instructed. But again, what's fascinating is even when the BBC writes the story and they're covering it all their broadcast today, it's always about these awful legal advisors, a shadow industries charging thousands of pounds to help migrants. Migrants whose visa due are being given fake cover stories, instructed. No. The migrants, the people who are illegally trying to stay in this country, are lying and cheating and choosing to pay these companies who are providing a service which is wrong. Absolutely, I want them punished. But don't make out these people are victims. They've got no right to stay in the country and they're lying to stay. I don't even get, frankly, why, if someone is gay, that they have to be given asylum anyway. Come on in, the water's lovely and everything, but realistically, I mean, women in Afghanistan, say, for instance, women in many parts of the countries where being gay is basically punishable and against the law, and women in those countries face, similar levels of appalling treatment and lack of rights. But women can't pretend not to be women. They have to suffer. As awful as it is, but given that this is what happened very horrendously and very sadly in this country and many other Western countries until, until around the time I was born in the 60s, had to pretend to not be gay to basically be able to, have a job, have a life and not be in prison.
Have a bank account.
Yeah, and that's appalling and awful. I'm not endorsing it. But, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, on that basis, we could take every single person from the third world, couldn't we? Because everyone could say, well, I'm gay, I can't stay.
I've never known so many gay Christians coming into this country. I mean, who knew that there was an influx of those coming in from Afghanistan and Eritrea? It's nothing new. I've seen this so many times.
Ex-Home Office.
And there was one particular case where we had to take it to the High Court to fight it, of a chap who didn't want to be deported to a country because he was gay and he didn't feel he would get a fair treatment in that country. He was going back to the Gold Coast of Australia.
I mean, literally, you couldn't have. I mean, I tell you what's really interesting. People say, isn't it awful? These people have to leave these countries.
Yeah.
And these people who are shouting for these migrants, and isn't, you know, we should be offered asylum. People who are gay. What's fascinating? These are the same people who think that the worst country in the Middle East is Israel, and every other country is somehow put upon terribly badly treated company. The only country in the Middle East where you can openly be gay, where you can have a gay pride event, where you can walk around, be openly gay, and it be celebrated and welcomed, is Israel. It's almost like that. It's like a Western liberal democracy and a country we should support. Just throwing that out there as an aside, everybody. These things often seem to come up. Let's also talk about what happens to, largely boat migrants who come here. But again, a lot of these people, they'll have to be put into accommodation because they suddenly, having worked here, suddenly don't have any money. I'm suddenly destitute. I've been working here for years, suddenly destitute. Now, this is the story that Labour, they'll be crowing about this. God love them for trying to find some good news out of all the bad. Labour has moved 10,000 migrants out of hotels that we're paying a fortune for into shared accommodation and military barracks. This is part of slashing the £4 billion cost of housing asylum seekers, because obviously hotel rooms, even if it's 2 or 3 or 4 in a room, costs an awful lot more than someone being in a cruddy bedsit and sharing a room there. The number of migrants housed in hotels has fallen by a third, from over 30,000 in December to 20,000 this month. 11 more hotels have closed. They've tried to close the bigger hotels. However, I mean, they ain't gone home. They're not in camps or, you know, in prison accommodation, effectively, where they can't leave their premises and we're you know, it's basic accommodation. We are paying for them to live in accommodation in the same way we pay for young Brits to live in accommodation if they're unemployed. We're paying basically out of a different bill, to all intents and purposes, their rent, their housing benefit, are we not? And they're now living amongst us. So instead of us knowing that hotel at the end of the road, in my case, that is a hotel for asylum seekers, they're now just living in the bedsits in the streets around us. And flats. Those, by the way, often needed by, local people looking for cheap accommodation. This is in no way anything to celebrate.
No, it isn't. It isn't. And the government are going to try and put this out as some great success story that they've closed 11 hotels, where there is no transparency as to where those individuals are going to go. So you're right. They are going to end up in local communities spread across the country. We don't know where, we don't know how many. There are many areas that have a high number of houses of multiple occupation or planning permission for them coming through. And they're not going to those on the housing waiting list who have been there for years and years, who absolutely need it. So the government can crow all it's like. It's not making a dent in the number of people who are coming here. If you look at the small boat
still being
arrivals,
given accommodation.
And they've still got to be accommodated.
And
you're not getting
the number in hotels in December, they're going from this figure at 30,000. That is higher than the figure was when they came in July 2024. It carried on going up, as we know. We talked about it incessantly on the show. But this is the thing. At least, if I had a young teenage daughter, and I can say that Holiday Inn at the top of the road, now can you avoid it? I don't feel... The stats, I'm sorry, I'm not saying every single person who's coming here illegally on a boat, paying people, smugglers, and throwing their identity into the sea is a risk to my daughter. But too many are. Oh, I can say avoid that street, avoid that part of the high street. Just be careful. But you can't avoid anywhere if it's just these are people who are just dotted around your local streets, and you do know where they live. I know where they're living around my way because I can see them hanging around on the street. And again, I live in a nice area. I've had to work very hard over the years to afford to live in my street, but apparently you can just rock up on a dinghy and get a bedsit in my street.
But what is the government doing to actually make this situation any better? It keeps going on about the amount of...
Talking to the French.
Yeah, because that one in, one out scheme's working so well.
Do you not get the memo? I find your negative attitude towards this government very distressing.
Do you? I'd like that on a postcard,
That's not very convincing. Look, just finally, let's... I don't know. I thought I kept a straight face there. Trump, this on the Iran war, because everything keeps coming back to a lot of this, doesn't it? Donald Trump has hinted that Iran talks could resume this week. He's also hinted at dropping our trade deal with the US. Not that that's actually properly in existence, as far as I'm aware. So I don't know where that's come from. And he's also said we need to get on with net zero. He's done various interviews. Basically, any journalist journalist in Washington could call him up, and he answers the phone and he chats to them for a bit. And we should get rid of net zero, yada yada yada. But he has talked about journalists need to stay in Islamabad. There'll be more talks coming in the next couple of days between Iran and the US. We've had these talks between Lebanon and the Israelis in Washington yesterday. I mean, I'm not that hopeful of those coming about, but at
least they're doing it. At least they are actually sitting down and talking, because I think the situation was so dire. Lebanon were never going to stop hurling rockets over it.
Well, not Lebanon, it's Hezbollah, but the Lebanon government has allowed a militia to take over their country. It's got a bigger army than the own Lebanese army. What would you expect? I mean, I mean, it is not a mystery, isn't it, why Israel decided just out of the blue to start bombing targets in Lebanon. We're going to be talking to a guest tomorrow, actually, Michael Oren. He's a former Israeli ambassador to the US, about this specific issue, because I've got to be honest with you, I'm getting really, really fed up with these reports about how terrible it is that Israel is targeting civilians. Sorry, Hezbollah is embedded into the civilian infrastructure certainly in southern Lebanon and throughout Beirut as well. They are targeting military terrorist organisation, who has been targeting them. Tens of thousands of Israelis can't live in northern Israel because they've been targeted. Didn't see much coverage of that, though, on the BBC, did we? I mean, it's as if Israel has just suddenly decided to open up another front in the war out of the blue, just because, they're Jews and they like killing babies. I mean, that's kind of, it is, that is basically the underlying message.
It is.
But why is Israel bombing Lebanon? It's because Hezbollah in Lebanon has been bombing Israel, and they need to remove that terrorist organisation.
Yeah,
simple as that. They do. We wouldn't allow that to happen to our country. No country would allow that to happen to them without retaliating and without trying to deal with that threat.
But it's always Israel are the bad people in this, they're the enemy. So it's absolutely ridiculous. And civilians don't understand the situation out there.
No, exactly. And civilians will die, and have died, and that's terrible. But the reason why civilians are dying is because, like Hamas, Hezbollah operate exactly the same thing, where they actually hide deliberately among the civilians. And it doesn't matter how many warnings Israel puts out and says, we are going to be bombing this area, this body, please can you remove yourselves? And a lot of people do, a lot of people don't. And because Hezbollah wants there to be civilian deaths, because they are sick. Because they know that the BBC and other Western media and the left will lap that stuff up and blame Israel, whereas in fact the fault is 100% on the terrorists who are putting those civilians at risk. It is as simple as that. It is so black and white. It terrifies me that supposedly clever people, both in our media and in Parliament, and some absolute Egypts in that party, like the Green Party and the Left of Labour Party, and the Lib Dems, they're just as bad, don't understand this stuff.
But they've never bothered to learn, because it's much easier for them to paint Israel as the enemy of the Middle East, and they are the all-round bad guys, that anything else that happens is irrelevant to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's frightening.
It really is, isn't it? There's so much more to talk about, including Bridget Phillipson, who is Education Secretary, also Women's Minister, who is a traitor to her sex. I don't know if she understands the concept of biology, because that's apparently not. She wants trans guidance on basically on women's single-sex basis. She wants it to be, quote, more inclusive. Yeah, it is inclusive. Women and girls. It includes all women and girls. It's not complicated, love. And if you want to come in the studio anytime so I can explain it to you, you're welcome. 10:25 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to get to your calls. I want to hear your thoughts on all of the big topics we talk about. In particular, Britain suffering the biggest economic shock in the G7 from the Iran energy crisis. But Rachel Reeves is blaming Trump's folly, in her words, instead of net zero Labour's failures, which is what the IMF is blaming us getting a bigger hit than other countries on. What's your reaction to that? Love to hear your thoughts on those 10,000 migrants moved out of hotels, asylum hotels. So, yeah, it'll be cheaper, but let's face it, they're going to be moved into communities. Labour government is hoping, just as the last Tory government hoped, that we'll kind of not notice and forget about these people. We won't. They're not letting us forget about them, are they? Because the crime figures are making that damn sure that we can't. I want to hear your thoughts on both. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls, as you know, are charged at a national rate, and text cost one standard network rate message. This is Talk. breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain?
Yeah.
Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk Them with Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to your calls. Andrew is in Hertfordshire and wants to have his say. What do you want to tell us, Andrew?
Yeah, in relation to the benefits and kickstarting the economy,
Yep.
the point that you made in relation to people that have got benefits, that it won't be taken away. We're taking away benefits from them now because every time we pay someone who isn't entitled to benefits,
Exactly.
their benefits are less. The reality of it is if you've paid in for 60 years or if you have a underlying health problem, we support you.
Yep.
Anybody that's 18 who hasn't paid in, there's nothing. And that's
unless they're disabled. But that I agree with you. I think, and that used to be the principle. That said, the biggest cost. I mean, I think it's immoral for us to be paying benefits to people who don't need them. But the biggest single cost to the state is pensions. So people say, well, I've paid in for 40 years or whatever. It's like, yeah, but you ain't paid enough to cover being on a pension for the 30 years. And it is a matter of fact that pensioners have been doing a lot better than younger people and young families over the last few years.
But we don't know how much of their getting better is spent supporting their families who aren't doing so well. So we'll never know that
That's a good point.
How that pans out. The reality is, cut the NHS by 60 million, cut the benefits bill by 100 million, and just get that money into infrastructure like Stonehenge, which they cancelled, and then spend on the military, because the flow down from that is spectacular.
Well, I would say, by the way, I would cut the spending. I've got it on defence, but I would also just simply take that money and give it back to people, because businesses and individuals tend to spend their money rather more wisely. Andrew, thank you for that call. Very interesting. Sean is in Sevenoaks. Sean, you want to talk about migration, don't you? What do you want to tell us?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the article you were referring to earlier with lawyers supporting bogus asylum claims. And and I agree with you that painting the illegal immigrants as victims is wrong.
Yeah.
But I do think the bigger point is the criminality of the lawyers.
Yeah.
And it seems to me it's just another example of criminality going unpunished.
Yeah.
I really think the lawyers in these cases, there need to be serious consequences.
Oh, they should be. I mean, absolutely, they should lose their licence. But exactly, it's law firms and it's advisors, often with charities. And a lot of these charities, by the way, our taxes fund them. I don't know why we're paying for any migration. I don't know why we gave money to any charity. I don't understand that. If it's a charity, it should be funded by public donation, surely.
Yeah, but to be honest, that's not an area that I've particularly thought about, but I don't immediately disagree with it. But I do agree with you, they should be struck off. The law should be struck off. They should be jailed, and they should be required to prove their wealth, and any wealth they've accumulated through criminality should be taken off them. And frankly, I think that approach should be applied to all criminals, whether they're drug dealers or car thieves or phone thieves. And that way, if you have proper disincentives to criminality, then maybe that will reduce people's enthusiasm to be criminals.
Yeah, at the moment, these lawyers and firms, they probably think, it's a free hit, isn't it? They get to They get to make money out of it. A lot of the charity people will think that they're doing, you know, they're doing God's work of letting every Tom, Dick and Harry from around the world come and live in this country. But there's no punishment for them. Sean, great call. Thank you very much. 10:33 is the time. Quick break. Then we're going to be talking more about, well, basically defence spending versus welfare spending, as brought up by Lord Robertson, the former NATO chief and former Defence Secretary, yesterday. And we're going to be talking about that with the wonderful British Army veteran in the Falklands War. You'll know him well, Simon Weston, CBE. Don't want to miss that. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearson is still with me, former Conservative Government for Get what she has to say about my next guest's thoughts. Simon Weston, CBE, is a British Army veteran, of course, with the Falklands War. You'll, I'm sure, remember him well. And he's here to talk to us about, well, some extraordinary comments we've had in the last 24 hours from former Defence Secretary, now Lord Robertson, former NATO Secretary General as well, and, of course, the man who was trusted by the Prime Minister, Simon, to write the Strategic Defence Review for him only last year. But he was not holding back yesterday, talking about just, in his words, the peril that this country is in by splurging billions on welfare, 5 times the defence budget, when we are in danger. What did you make of what he had to say?
Well, it's nothing that we didn't know.
True.
The fact that we aren't prepared. And we aren't prepared because we don't have enough bodies in the military. The spending is way too low. I signed a letter along with generals asking for at least 5% of GDP to be spent on the military. And then to hear that they want to get them to cut money, 3.5 billion in the armed forces spend.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Are we going to be spending money on body bags?
It looks like we probably will. I mean, that is the extraordinary thing. We've got every single person. I mean, I don't think there's a former Defence Secretary, former, senior military figure, anyone who knows anything about MI6, MI5, anyone who knows anything about the subject who doesn't think we need to be upping our defence spending and spending it a damn sight more wisely as well, and doing it yesterday, not even today, doing it yesterday. And yet Rachel Reeves apparently, although there's been a demand for basically a minimum of £28 billion more in our current £60 billion defence budget, she's apparently behind the scenes saying she could maybe manage £10 billion over 4 years, which isn't much more than lining up with inflation. But as you say, this year the Treasury is demanding a £3.5 billion defence cut. We've got war in the Middle East. We've got war in Europe, in Ukraine. We've got clear evidence of Russia preparing God knows what, with, like, you know, monitoring our undersea cables and goodness knows what. And the government is talking about cutting defence spending this year.
Mr. Starmer is desperate to align with Europe, and it looks like the French and the Germans are building up their armed forces in preparation for a war that we really don't need to have happen. Another one, we see the Chancellor blaming Mr. Trump for the troubles that the country's in. All that has happened in Iran, because we've not committed anything to Iran, so we're not spending any of our money there. But what it's done is exposed our weaknesses, our unpreparedness for any problems. And we could cure a lot of our energy problems with the North Sea. It's very straightforward. This is not a party political broadcast. It's just the fact that we all can see, and being a small business owner, we can all see how flawed it is. National insurance is crippling employment. We're having problems. Everybody's having problems. And I experienced that yesterday when I went for a meeting. There is no plan. And the plan seems to be made up on the hoof. But this military idea to cut money, all you're doing is preparing to fill those body bags I mentioned. Because if we haven't got the equipment, we should be planning on. There should never be a peace dividend. People say, and I've spoken to people in governments about it, there should never be a peace dividend. It should be about investing. We'd be investing in our own arms industry and our own equipment industry, so people would be employed. But the fact of the matter is we need the equipment. You can't do, as they did in the first Gulf War, the just-in-time procurement process, which cost lives in the beginning, because the equipment wasn't on the shelf to be issued very quickly. Because wars happen so quickly, as we saw with Ukraine, as we've seen with Iran. I mean, irrational in many ways, but we've heard different Arab leaders say now that Iran had funneled the money that Obama had given them into nuclear programs rather than infrastructure. So they clearly had a program ongoing. But at the end of the day, did we need to blow it to pieces? You know, I'll leave that one.
Well, again, that is going to be a diplomatic decision. And again, like Rachel Reeves saying, it was folly of the Trump government to go into a conflict without an exit plan, without, you know, clear aims. There is an element of truth in that, but however, there's also folly in terms of, well, again, there was an element. It does appear that there was a moment of opportunity where they had info that they could get basically all of the Tehran leaders in one room at one time and kill them all. I think that was worth doing. But yeah, there hasn't been clearly enough planning. But we were aware there was a plan in the British government, and we didn't do any planning. No gas storage. They're still pushing on net zero. And as you say, as a small business owner now yourself, you know, the impact of the high taxes from recent budgets and all the impact of that. There's a folly there in terms of long-term planning by this government and the last few governments as well, in terms of not making sure that we are resilient. Because this is the thing about wars. Again, Falklands War, in which you fought and were severely injured. You know, that came out of the blue in lots of ways, well, certainly for most of us in the public. And there's an element where you need to have forces ready to go within days if you need them. We didn't even have HMS Dragon ready to go within a couple of weeks. It took a week to sail to the Med to protect our RAF base in Cyprus. And then what was it, a week later, it had to be taken back to port for more maintenance. I mean, this is a national humiliation, is it not? And as we all know, the best way of preventing a war is having the ability and the willingness to fight a war, because that is the deterrent.
Absolutely. You have to have preparedness. You have to have people ready to go. It takes years to train people to be totally efficient on the equipment that modern warfare dictates. I was in Ukraine only a few weeks ago, and I was talking to a lot of veterans who've lost limbs, who've been severely disabled, badly burnt, and they were all teachers, they were all lecturers, they were all engineers, they were all bus drivers, truck drivers, they were farmers. And they had to upskill very quickly. But unfortunately, they're suffering the ravages of modern conflict because of drones, because of the modern artillery, things that take a long time to prepare for, to learn how to use, to learn how to try and avoid.
Yeah.
Because, you know, just having it to fire at people, you've got to remember, they're just as accurate. They're going to be firing back.
Yeah.
And how to avoid all of these things. Tactics and techniques are modern today. They are very hard taught, and they cost money to be taught.
Yeah.
So if you look at Germany, where they're basically saying to people, you can't go abroad for for longer than 3 months because of they're looking at having
fighting age men anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And what they're saying is we need to be ready. They're going to start looking at investing in...
But that's it, Germany. I mean, Merz in Germany seems to have absolutely got his act together, whether it's on issues, I would say, things like migration, net zero and things like that. He seems to just be sensible on that. The Finns, the Poles, the Latvias, Estonias and Lithuanians, the countries that are on the front line of dealing with Russia, they absolutely get it, and they've been getting their act together for a long time. What do you think stops our political leadership? And I include the Conservatives in the last few years about that, even after the invasion of Ukraine proper and the invasion of Crimea in 2014. What do you think has stopped our politicians from doing what is necessary to keep us safe, when every single man and his dog who's got any military and security knowledge in this country has been telling us that we need to do more? Is it they don't get it? Is it that they don't want to spend money that the public, claim they support but won't pay the taxes for? They don't have to make the corresponding cuts to things like the welfare bill or NHS to do it? Is it they just don't understand, and they just think that everything can be just talked around a table and be resolved that way? What is it?
Well, there's an awful lot of short-termism, short-term ideology. There's ideology certainly in this current government. When you look at the net zero hoax, the big difficulty as well comes down to they haven't got skin in the game.
Yeah.
If they had skin in the game, their own children, the likelihood that their children would have to go to war, that they could be having to nurse somebody back to health with disabilities caused by conflict, isn't a reality right now. But they all have their projects, and they've only got 5 years maximum. And if the project doesn't work, or it overruns or overspends, they walk away with absolutely no responsibility, not to have to put their hands up. They say, not our problem now, we're no longer in government, it's your problem. And what happens then? Somebody else comes along from some hedge fund who employs them. So they walk straight out into a big government or company job. And what do we see? Every single solitary civilian who's not really involved with government or politics, they end up having to pay the price, as we're seeing now. The raid on pensions, the capital gains on pensions, all these things, just because people have worked hard, saved hard, this government seems to dislike anybody to get ahead. Yep. And is that part of the new plan about digital ID and all the rest of it? Don't let them get ahead. Don't let them get too wealthy. We can check everything they spend, check everything they've got in their bank account, which HMRC are doing right now. And they took money out of my mother. My mother's not well, she's 85, and they took money out of her bank account.
Wow.
Out of her pension. How can that be allowed when, HMRC, seriously, how heartless do they have to be? My mother's a widow, lives on her own, and she's very poorly, and they took money out of her account. That's what this government is all about. Yeah, okay. I thought Labour was supposed to be about the people. I thought they were supposed to be about caring about the working class. My mother was a nurse for 50 years. Hardly somebody who was leaping ahead in the financial space.
Tax the millionaires. I doubt it. Yeah, Simon Weston, we covered a lot of ground there. I'd love to find out more about what happened with you. If you could give a bit more information off air to my producer, that'd be really helpful about that. Simon Weston, pleasure to speak to you, sir. Simon Weston, former army veteran and the Falklands War, of course, you'll know him well. Claire Pearsall, going back to sort of the defence side of things, it's interesting to talk about. It's the short-termism, it's the ideology. These are the issues. He's obviously no fan of the Labour government, but still.
Yeah, but I think it's politics and politicians as a whole. They tend to look at a 5-year term in government, and they don't plan anything more than that because it's not feasible for them to do so. They're not going to reap the rewards of it, for example. Yeah. And that's how our politics has become, this very short term. What can we do now to be recognised for what is the legacy that I want? And defence spending has always seemed to some people to not be that interesting, not really.
You're not
that
even going to
needed.
get the tanks for 5 years.
Yeah, and it's all too much in the future that they don't consider it. And here we are looking down the barrel of war.
Thank you very much. Right, love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Do get in touch. Again, especially with Rachel Reeves blaming effectively, basically. All the reasons we're in trouble, I mean, you know what Labour are going to do about this, are basically down to the Iran conflict. But the reason we are hardest hit, according to the IMF, who may know something about these subjects, is actually because of our net zero policies, importing more fuel rather than actually getting it ourselves from the North Sea and elsewhere, but also because of basically we are taxing people to the hilt, and it's impacted the economy as well. All that coming up. Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Up next, though, we're going to talk about the NHS failing women and girls with an appalling culture of medical misogyny. That's what the Health Secretary says. But is it true? That's up next. Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:51 is the time. Let's talk about the NHS. Do quite a lot of that these days, largely about how much it costs us and about doctors on strike. But this time it's a statement from the Health Secretary. He's accused the NHS of having what he calls an appalling culture of medical misogyny. He set out a range of measures in a renewed women's health strategy, first set up actually under the Tories. But he said the NHS has a problem with basic everyday sexism, and the changes would stop women from being ignored, gaslit, humiliated and disrespected. It's amazing. I mean, you could just start with nurses who were women being forced to change in changing rooms with a man who's put a dress on and calls himself Sandra, claiming to be a woman watching them. You could start with that in terms of your misogyny, Wes Streeting, but no, of course you wouldn't. Don't be silly. You take those women out and you make sure the NHS punishes those women, don't you, till they go to court. But anyway, let's talk about what is the real issue here, because Dr. Basha Mukherjee is an NHS GP and she joins us right now. Good morning to you, Basha.
Good morning, Julia.
I have to say, I mean, we found out recently, according to Maternity Care, that the NHS is staffed by a whole load of racists who don't give painkillers or take black women or Asian women seriously. Now we find out a whole load of sexists who don't take women seriously either. I mean, why were we clapping for these people during 2020 and COVID? Because they sound like a horrible bunch of people working in the NHS.
So I want to just say that there's systemic failures within this, and part of what Labour has pledged to do to tackle this problem, one of the statements is that they would like women not to have to repeat their story every time. And I get this statement all the time when I see my patients as well. Oh, I'm so glad I get to see the same doctor because I'm tired of having to tell.
That's got nothing to do with someone being a woman. That's a problem with a load of you GPs working only a 3-day week, so they don't get continuity of care. Sod all to do with someone being a woman.
Well, this is what one of the pledges is. So I'm talking from the pledge sheet from Labour.
It's got nothing to do with women.
Well, I'm talking about the fact that one of the issues here is that without continuity of care, without appropriate continuity of care, women do have to keep repeating their story.
So do men.
They do get taken, get taken seriously. No, we're talking about this issue at hand over here, women's issues, women's health.
But that's not specific to women.
Well, we're talking about this issue here. The misogyny concept is coming into the fact from the point that women's health issues are undermined within the NHS.
How?
And that's down to the fact that a lot of times women will complain of especially menstrual related issues and not get taken seriously, especially by male colleagues sometimes who may say, oh, that's just a normal period.
Yeah.
Whereas periods can look very different, and there's a huge misunderstanding definitely within the medical community of what's considered normal and what's considered abnormal.
Okay,
this also comes down from the fact how long you have with the patient to really get the full understanding of what their periods actually look like, without asking how often are you needing to change your pads. And that's a crucial question, really. How do you quantify heavy versus
But is this misogyny, or is this just really poor training of doctors?
I don't think it's poor training of doctors.
Well, if the doctor doesn't know to ask those questions, then that's poor training of doctors.
It's not about not knowing to ask the question. It's actually about having that continuity. The truth is that you can't cover everything within one consultation, especially when given 10-minute consultation.
Well, a doctor could sorry. My mother was a GP. My mother was a GP. I was receptionist at a surgery for a summer. If you think that appointment needs, you can have a second appointment. You can actually have a double appointment.
This is the problem. We do not have enough appointments. We don't have enough GPs to provide that continuity of care. Now, Julia, you brought a really good point into this about doctors working part-time. Well, pay them correctly so that they want to work within the NHS.
Basha, the point at which doctors started working part-time was after their pay was massively increased and they were able to work part-time and still take in a good salary.
We talk about the fact that the workload for GPs has grown in the last 10 years massively. So each doctor is taking on more patients. Within the UK, we are seeing more patients per doctor. So the incidence of burnout within doctors is higher. So of course that would result in
a lot of that is online appointments. So they count having seen someone and literally seeing my prescription renewal or seeing a patient. I don't think that's going to cause burnout. Look, I accept your point on doctors not being knowledgeable. By the way, I've seen the same problem in friends of mine and family members who see female doctors as well as male doctors, an issue with not taking, say, menstrual pain seriously, but also menopause. We talked about that a lot, women being fobbed off when actually, in my view, virtually every woman at the age of 40 should just be on full-time HRT and their lives would be changed.
As well. One of the big problems that West Treating has, with his new tenure, has brought on is the problem that started with April, where GPs are not able to refer anymore. We have to go back and forth, delaying care for patients. We know how long the waiting lists already were before patients got to see gynecology. Yeah. And one of the issues we're talking about here within this article is that patients get delayed in the process of getting to the right care for their endometriosis. We know there's not a lot that can be done for endometriosis in primary care. Most patients end up with the severe form of endometriosis. They end up needing surgery. So they will need to be seen by gynecologists. We know to slash the waiting list, West Treating has created this new system where we can't just directly refer to gynecology anymore. We have to go back and forth.
Fine, but Basha, everything you're talking about is about failures of NHS management, failures of NHS resource direction, failures of individual GPs, failures of individual doctors, as opposed to misogyny or sexism. I'm sorry.
It boils down to misogyny. So if it's impacting women at the end,
that doesn't make it misogyny. It's just that women go to the doctor more than men. Men are mostly impacted by the fact they never go to the doctor, and so that's why they. I mean, it doesn't make it sexist or misogynistic. If more women are impacted, more women go to the doctor because they take their kids to the doctor. I mean, women have got menopause, which men don't have, so they're more likely to go to the doctor. That doesn't mean it's motivated by hatred of women.
I don't think any of this is motivated by hatred.
Well, that's what misogyny means.
But rather the misunderstanding and the system failures that perpetuate.
So nothing to do with sexism, nothing to do with misogyny. So he's wrong. There's not a culture of medical misogyny. There's just a bloody useless NHS management. That's what there is.
I think I agree with that. And I also will say there's one more point I want to make.
Okay, very quick. You've got about 10 seconds. Sorry.
Yes, about the fact that my male colleagues do not get to see the same patients that I get to see. Most female patients would prefer to see female doctors. When I was a medical student, the male colleagues, my male medical students, would be asked to stand outside, and that is part of the problem.
Okay, so again, women are creating a problem where they're not letting the men get the expertise. But again, we're going to blame misogyny. There's plenty of misogyny and there's plenty of sexism. Let's not make it up where it doesn't exist. Basha, Dr. Basha Mukherjee, go back and see a patient. They're waiting in your waiting room right now at HSGP. Basha, they're up next to get the latest headlines. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. If you've welcome to the show if you've just tuned in. If you have just tuned in, you've missed a fascinating conversation with the GP in the last few moments. I'm going to get Claire Pearsall's thoughts on that in just a moment. But I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And whether you are listening on DAB Plus radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your Connect device, great to have your company. If you have missed anything of the show, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. And I can get to stop telling you to do it. Which was, look, it's in everyone's interest, seriously. Anyway, we're all the way, I'm with you all the way until 1 o'clock. Coming up, we're going to be talking more about Rachel Reeves over in Washington, just basically criticising Donald Trump as she arrives. Brilliant move, Rachel, brilliant move. IMF criticising her for terrible, terrible economic policies on net zero and high taxes on businesses and everybody else for the state we're in, and a particular hit we're going to take from the Iran oil crisis. And we're also going to be talking about Labour moving 10,000 migrants out of asylum hotels into shared accommodation, so HMOs, into a few military barracks as well, in an attempt to cut that £4 billion hotel asylum bill. But they're still here and we're still paying for them. And guess what? They're never going to be thrown out of the country. You're welcome, everybody. You can pay for that for the rest of your life. But don't worry, we haven't got enough money to spend on defence. By the way, that £4 billion cost for the hotel asylums, that is the same amount of money as the Chancellor would like to spend over the next couple of years, pretty much, increasing our defence budget. Yeah, that's all she's offering. That's all she's offering. But don't worry about the whole, lots of wars everywhere thing. But there we are. So much to talk about. I want to hear from you in particular on two of the biggest topics of the day. First, Britain will suffer the biggest economic shock in the G7 from the Iran energy crisis. That's what we're being told by the IMF. But Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor over in Washington now, is blaming Trump's, in her words, folly over the Iran war, instead of course, net zero and Labour's own failures. Also want to hear from you about those 10,000 migrants moved out of asylum hotels. Is that something to cheer about? Or is it just a cunning way to hide the cost of these people? Because, by the way, when they are given, as they inevitably will be, given the right to remain in this country because they can't be deported, no one's got the wherewithal, we're not going to leave the ECHR, etc., we'll be paying for their housing benefit forevermore. Oh yeah, and their unemployment benefit as well, because I have a funny feeling they're not all going to get jobs as neurosurgeons and astrophysicists. I know, I'm as surprised as you are, but I'd love to hear your reaction to that as well. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged the national rate and text cost one standard network rate message. As I said, still joining me today is former Conservative Government advisor Claire Pearsall. Very, very good morning once again to you. I know I want to move on to IMF and war and defence and everything, but I've got to give you a chance to come back on our GP, Dr. Bashir Mukherjee. Put a valiant effort in, but I hate these stories when you get this, NHS has an appalling culture of medical misogyny, and basically there's a problem of basic everyday sexism where women are being ignored, gaslit, humiliated and disrespected. Who's saying this? The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. I mean, we say we thought we were told the other day that all these women are dying in childbirth because they're black, because of horrible racist NHS staff. Now they're all sexist. I mean, we definitely should not have got our pots and pans out and clapped for these people during the COVID pandemic, because they're a right old bunch of nasty pieces of work, apparently. What do you make of that conversation?
It astounds me that there is this absolute desire to label something to do with women as being misogynistic or sexist, and the desire to create this problem that doesn't particularly exist in my mind. It also then brings down those women who do suffer with terrible cases of sexism or misogyny in the workplace. Now just everybody's going to go, oh really, is it that bad?
It does undermine it does absolutely. And again, this idea misogyny is hatred of women.
Yes,
like hatred, and it does a doctor not giving you HRT the first time you ask isn't a hatred of women, it's a badly trained doctor. Precisely. They're talking about delays that women face. More women go. The reason why a lot of men are dying of cancers, because men don't go to the doctor at all. Women are far more likely to enter that route and talk to their friends and say, oh, should I go to the doctor? Yes, you know, and you talk to your mum about it, you go, yeah, well, I talk to my mum because she's a doctor. So if I turn up at the GP, they know I've already talked to a doctor before I turn up. But I mean, that's stupid. I mean, and one of the things our NHS GP was saying, you know, women having to repeat themselves and tell their story all over again. I've been getting physio for a bad knee. I've got torn cartilage. Oh, skiing, what a great idea that was. Been limping around the office, getting no sympathy, by the way, old hop along in the office here. And every time I've had a new video, you get a new video appointment, you have to start from scratch every time. Yes. I'm not sitting there going, this is so sexist. This person, male or female, must be a misogynist. It's just like, no, it's just a silly system where you can't just upload it and just go, here you go, here's all the information, here you are. It pains me that otherwise sensible people, I'd like to think our doctors are sensible, think this. But also, here's a point. Wes Streeting, with all due respect, and I used to think he was one of the sensible people in this government. He started off it. If you've got a whole bunch of nurses, your Sandy Peggies and others, who I mean, okay, I know some of the cases are in Scotland, so he doesn't have any say over it. But we've got a whole bunch of women who are nurses who are being forced to get changed down to their bra and knickers to change into their uniforms in front of men who claim to be trans simply by calling themselves Sandra and growing their hair long, who stand and watch them while they're getting changed. And you're talking about the dignity of women and misogyny. Frankly, with all due respect, Wes Streeting, you can do one. You really, really can. And by the way, that Supreme Court ruling was a year ago tomorrow about what a woman was, and the NHS still, most hospitals are still allowing men on women single-sex wards, men in single-sex changing rooms and toilets, and all of that. So I'm sorry. And you're still, by the way, allowing the NHS to put out adverts for promotions and campaigns about women's health, talking about people with cervixes and pregnant people. It's only women. They're the only people who are affected by those things. And by the way, not a single campaign aimed at men ever talks about people. It's about men with testicular cancer, men with prostate cancer. It never goes back the other way. You want to talk about misogyny? There's your misogyny, Wes. Do something about that before you go around claiming that we're all being victims of sexism because we had to wait in a queue to get some care, because that's a load of nonsense. I was going to say a load of two dangling things in a men's trousers, but you know what I mean. Should we go back to some other issues that are real, that actually are real? Really gets my goat, it really does. Rachel Reeves, she's useless. We knew she was useless before she became Chancellor, but we found out she's lied about her CV. Every single thing she has done or said, including crying in the Commons, has shown us how useless she is. Her abacus was broken a long time ago. She's the only person in the world who hasn't got a calculator on her own mobile phone. She hasn't got a clue what she's doing. She thinks you could kickstart the economy by having the highest energy costs in the Western world and by putting up the cost of hiring people, whether it's minimum wage, whether it's national insurance on employers, you name it, and she thinks that will give us a booming economy. The woman's an idiot. I think idiot is not too strong a word. She's going out there right now in Washington for the annual sort of spring meeting of the IMF, who yesterday issued a warning about the impacts of the Iran war and the oil price spike. Now, bearing in mind that their predictions, their forecasts, they're always wrong. All major forecasters get it wrong, always, without exception. Also that their forecasts are based on an incredibly optimistic view that this war is only going to be taking a few weeks and everything's going to be fine and the Strait of Hormuz is open. They predicted that we are going to face the biggest economic shock of the G7 countries this year. We've seen our own growth expectations downgraded by 0.5 percentage point, which is a lot, from 1.3% down to 0.8%. We're going to have the smallest increase in living standards in the world. I'm surprised there's any increase, frankly. We're going to have the highest inflation in the G7. And what do they put this down to? Is it just there is war? No, it's because we are so reliant on gas imports. Therefore, we have to face these extra costs. And we have had weak growth. We've got a lack of storage of gas as well. And we've got that £30 billion tax rate from last year's budget. So it's basically the government and your lot, the Tories, when you're in net zero policies, all of your faults, but particularly hers. She hasn't tried to turn the tanker around. Quite literally, she's basically sunk it. She's off to Washington, having done an interview where she says she's frustrated and angry at the president and his war in Iran, and says that there's the folly of going into this war without a proper plan for what to do and how to exit. Pretty fair points. Are they wise points to be making at a time when you're arriving in America and when we are so reliant on America for our security and indeed our economic success?
No, I mean, I'm frustrated and angry at Rachel Reeves and her non-economic policy. And I think that Donald Trump is going to not care one jot as to what she's going to say, in the UK media about him. Yeah. I think
when he finds out who she is.
Well, can he pick her out of a parade? I doubt it very much. He's just sort of going to nod and...
It's the one crying. The one crying in a really badly made suit.
I wouldn't mind also if she made these comments if we were coming from a stable economy country and everything was booming at home. She would have, much better soapbox to go and stand on and lecture other people. But when you're coming from a country which is a basket case economically at the moment, with enormous energy costs, enormous spiralling levels of debt and no growth, that she shouldn't go out there and make those kind of comments. What she needs to do is actually go and get a relationship with those countries that may be able to help us with the energy crisis.
Mad idea. It might catch on, but this is the thing. It's just so foolish. It's interesting. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he has basically sort of kind of hit back, but pointing out that actually a bit of pain. A small bit of economic pain, he says, is worth it for global security. Now, it may be actually, we're not getting a small bit of economic pain, and certainly lots of Middle Eastern countries and many poorer countries that are losing out on the fertiliser and the oil and the gas are getting a whole heap of pain, because I wonder what the hit to global GDP would be if a nuclear weapon hit London. I'm saying that I'm less concerned about short-term forecasts for long-term security, and this in terms of Iran having enriched uranium. Now, I'm with him on this. Yeah. I'd rather we didn't have an Iran conflict. At some point we were going to have one. We need to do it before they've got nuclear weapons. I don't know what how immediate the threat was. It was immediate enough. Whether the timing was perfectly right, whether America prepared properly, no, I don't think they did. We don't get to always choose these moments, but overall I think that this is a war that was going to have to be fought at some point. But we are going to face a bigger economic hit, and yet there is simply nothing in the government's plans to actually deal with that, to go drill for more oil at Rosebank, open up the more gas licenses at Jackdaw in the North Sea to give us more energy security. They are doubling down on net zero, and they're doubling down on basically high taxes, and they're doubling down on, let's face it, spending more on welfare. And we've had that warning from Lord Robertson, former NATO Secretary General, former Defence Secretary under Tony Blair, former only last year author of this Prime Minister's Strategic Defence Review. I think we can agree. George Robertson knows what he's talking about. He is trusted by many, many people. He knows his stuff, and he is saying that we are in peril. That's his word, in peril, because we have not spent enough on defence. 28 billion quid is what he'd recommended. We need to spend more on defence. I mean, we're spending 60 billion at the moment, but upping it by 28 billion over the next few years. Rachel Reeves apparently only looking at maybe 10 billion, but that's after this year a cut. Yeah, this is mind-blowing. Ukraine. Iran, the threat from Russia to us, the cybersecurity, everything. She's expecting the Defence Department, to cut £3.5 billion of spending this year. I mean, this is madness. They don't get it, do they?
No, they don't get it. And defence has always been one of those areas where people don't understand the necessity to spend the money right up until you've got a conflict, and then you just go, we need to send in the army. But also,
which army? Where?
Our answer to any kind of crisis in this country is send in the army, whether it be bins or school closures or snow on the roads. So, we want to send in the army. We need to invest in that. And I think Simon Weston, your previous guest this
Falklands
morning, Falklands veteran, absolutely spot on that we need to invest more in British equipment, British different.
It would be fantastic for our economy.
Arms and stuff like that. It would be fantastic for the economy. Look at the jobs that it would increase. But also just our own security of supply.
Yeah, I mean, again, did we not notice this even during lockdown and then the Ukraine war? I mean, okay, I know that's in recent years, and the Tories didn't get anything started on any of that front either. But But it is absolutely madness for us not to have had the wake-up call 15 million times already that we need to have more security over our supply lines. But also, as something George Robertson said, we can't spend money on defence if we have this ballooning welfare bill, which is more than 5 times what we spend on defence. Now, a lot of that is pensions. A lot of people defend that, but the triple lock on pensions, a lot of people are now querying. People you think, from the left, you think would not be. But I mean, my first query would not be the pensions triple lock. It would be working age people who should be working. Yes. I mean, Express today got a story. Universal credit is in full-blown crisis. This is what the shadow Work and Pension Secretary Helen Whately has called it. And they basically claimant numbers have soared by 1.5 million under Labour. New figures showing 8.4 million people are getting universal credit, up from 6.9 million when Keir Starmer swept to power with that steely determination to focus on growth, if you remember. I mean, you simply can't have that many people not working, and people go, oh, but lots of people on universal credit who work full-time. No, they aren't. No. When they apply on low incomes working part-time, they may be taking it, but the vast majority of people claiming universal credit are not working at all.
But also, what could the government actually point us towards what it's doing about it? It's just spending ever more on the benefit system, but we keep being told about free breakfast clubs. I know that's a particular...
What's the word there that's wrong? What's the word? The word? They're not free. They're not free. They're paid for. They're just paid for by taxpayers.
They are, but they're going to the people that are already claiming benefits from the state. So it isn't actually helping.
These free breakfast clubs are for all parents. My kid would get a free breakfast. My kid does not need a free breakfast. If she was at a state school and she's 7 years old, the idea that I or you or most of our audience, in fact, I've spoken to enough people who lived on benefits, severely disabled, really, really struggling financially, who've on minimum wage as well, who've said, I've never had any problem feeding my child. The children who ain't getting a breakfast in the morning have got failing parents. They're drug addicts. They're just, they're non-functioning. That is the problem, not them not having enough food to give their kid a bowl of cereal or a slice of toast in the morning. And the idea that the state should take a load of money from hard-working taxpayers to then give free breakfast. It's basically, look, for most parents who work, it's basically a bit of free childcare in the morning.
What I had
and that's fine. And that's absolutely fine. I understand that. But let's call it what it is. But it's not free. It's not. Nothing's free.
See,
and relax. Sorry. Well, I mean, it does. It should be illegal for the government to actually claim things are free. They're not free.
Of course they're not. There's always
the government doesn't have any money.
No, it doesn't. It's taxpayers have the money. Well, give it to them to spend wisely, which they don't. Yeah. But we need to look at where we're spending on the benefit system and stop increasing the amount that we give. Yeah. I think that we need to leave the pensions issue alone. That's something for another day that you could
Except
look
that
at.
is the biggest single thing. But it's not. There is not the moral case for that in the same way.
No, there isn't. But there is for the amount of people claiming universal credit. When you see increases like that, why?
Yeah, and exactly the number of people claiming disability benefits as well. And of course, the £4 billion a year Asylum hotels bill. Small point worth making. That's a lot of money. That ain't small change. That is a lot of money. I could be put back into people's pockets, or that could be spent on much better things, whether it's defence, whether it's actually for severely disabled people who really need help. Oh, and children who are really, really struggling because of what's going on in their families. Let's give the help. I mean, I queried the free breakfast thing. The words I've been called. I'm used to being called a baby killer and a granny killer, obviously, but I mean, just how appalling, what a heartless bitch I am, and goodness, the C word and everything, because I'm saying I don't think that we should be giving unquote free breakfasts to people whose parents can afford to give them breakfast. Apparently that makes me a terrible human being. No. I mean, these people are insane. I mean, let's just give everyone a free car and a free house. Oh, well, some people we do, apparently, if you claim a lot of those benefits. But we also give free housing to migrants. Now, the government is hailing these new figures. Labour has moved 10,000 migrants out of asylum hotels. But they haven't been put on planes back to France. No, they've been put into shared accommodation. So basically, your bed-sit land, houses of multiple occupations, and also military barracks. A few of them. I mean, there's very few. Crowborough we know about, and people down there don't want them. And RAF Wethersfield near Braintree as well. That accounts for about 1,600 people in total. But basically, they're being moved into your local roads. So they're no longer in the asylum hotel at the top of the road. They're now being moved into local local streets. Basically, it's going to cost less, but it's also a way of hiding them, because you can't have a demonstration outside every single bedsit, can you? But you can have one outside an asylum hotel. But the number of migrants based in hotels has fallen by a third, from 30,000 to 21,000 this month. That said, by the way, that figure from 30,000 in December is actually higher than it was when Labour came to power. So it's gone up and it's gone down a bit. But this isn't a source of something to celebrate. These people are still here and we're still paying for them.
And more people are coming over. So show me where the disincentive is for people to come here, because up until the beginning of April, just under 4,500 had crossed the Channel. No, and that's just in the first
No, it's 5,000. No, we're up to 5,000. I mean, it's been a few sunny days, Claire.
That's right. So I'm down on my figures,
honestly, the weather forecasters have more say over our asylum policy than the actual politicians.
You can't base your policy on the weather forecast, which is what they're trying to do.
It is basically what they're trying to do. But this just simply isn't. This isn't a success. This is literally just taking them out of one bit of accommodation into another. If they're going to be here, they need to be in basically prison camps where they're not allowed to work, they're not allowed to leave. We won't have rapes and sexual assaults of our children and our young women. They won't be doing those Deliveroo jobs and things. And I mean, I'm sorry, life is going to have to be made unpleasant for these people. But the human rights lawyers won't want that to happen, so it won't happen.
No, and it's creative accounting from the government, because all it's doing is hiding the cost somewhere else, and probably in a different department. So it's going to come out of the Home Office spending into someone else's. Exactly,
and as these people one by one are going to be assessed, and we can't send them home, what are we going to do? They are simply going to be, and we found out yesterday, wasn't it? Is it £48,000 for each, the one in, one out scheme?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, to send them back, and then some of them come back again. 48 grand. 48 grand. What are you talking about? We could be putting these people in the Ritz for the year, for God's sake. And they're coming back. It's just absolute madness. But yeah, they're going to be taken off those books, and they're basically going to be told, well, you can get indefinite leave to remain, because we can't.
What else are we going to do with you?
We can't give you asylum because we don't really know who you are, and we can't deport you anywhere. Got nothing to do, so we'll just take you off the books. But then they just go on the DWP's books because they're claiming benefits.
Yeah, but then
we're still paying for them.
It's going to be hidden under a large number of people claiming benefits, and they're not going to have the data of any breakdowns. So we're not going to know. The transparency that is available to us is next to nothing.
I feel like I'm going to have an angry day. I know, but it is just...
I feel this is my fault. I'm sorry. I bring up these things.
It's just so frustrating. I mean, is everyone involved in running our country an absolute imbecile?
Pretty much 98% of them.
Good to know. Good to know. God, that's depressing, isn't it?
It is depressing.
Just have me mention one other story. The King and the Queen are heading off to the States, this sort of anniversary visit of them, basically, the colonies breaking free. How's that working out for you? Ooh, pretty darn well for America, it turns out, if you look at their economy compared to ours. But King is set to address apparently the challenging nature of our relationship in address to Congress. Again, it's called historic. It's happened before. The Queen, the late Queen, did it as well. It doesn't happen very often. Neither do these trips happen very often. But he's going to be giving an address to Congress during a state visit. That's a good thing. He's not the greatest speaker in the world, King Charles, let's be honest.
No, but I think the soft power the monarch has on the diplomatic stage mustn't be underestimated.
This right now. This is what the royal family is for.
Absolutely is what it's for. And it doesn't matter if we don't think he's very good at speaking. The Americans do tend to love the royal family, any royal connection, and they will lap this up.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry on a pretend sort of royal tour in Australia, and it's come out this morning that Meghan, call me Meg. I mean, it's not the biggest stretch, is it?
No.
We call you a lot of things, Meg. Meg is going to appear on Australian MasterChef.
Well, that's nice for them, isn't it? I mean, I can't...
She's apparently a great baker. She's done all these shows. I mean, I don't know about you. I got through... I think I was 4 minutes in. And I went, I can't do it.
I think I watched the sort of opening 30 seconds and went, yeah, no.
Yeah, we made Rupert watch it.
Exactly,
here, but that was just sort of torture. Didn't. Yeah, then he HR'd us, you know. he could have, because that is literally painful. That is cruel and unusual punishment.
There seemed to be a lot of edible flowers going on with her.
There's a lot of arranging fruit on a board. I mean, she's going to win it. She's going to win it. I mean, seriously, these people are so awful. 11:26 is the time. On that happy note, it's going to go to your calls. We're going to take a quick break, and then I want to hear from you, in particular about this, this economic shock from the G7. Shock that the G7 has said that we're going to suffer the worst of the we're going to suffer the worst of the G7, according to the IMF. Sorry, get it right. But Rachel Reeves is blaming it all on basically the folly of the war, as opposed to net zero and her taxation policies. What's your reaction to that? And your reaction to 10,000 migrants moved out of asylum hotels on the high streets into, well, a bedsit near you. Happy about that? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk. Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive. We've been looking at...
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Sorry, it's not good afternoon yet. It's 11:30. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. Don't forget, we've got PMQs. First one since Easter, coming up at midday. Claire Pistol is here, she's former Conservative Government Advisor, and we'll also have Peter Cardwell in the studio as well to give their analysis. Let's get some of your messages coming in. Think I'm fast about, online, getting in touch about that big economic shock. We're going to face the worst in the G7 from the Iran energy crisis, basically down to net zero and Labour's failures. Rachel Reeves, though, says it's Trump's folly about the war. Sean says we've heard nothing but utter lies from this government. Scrap net zero and cut the welfare bill. Simple. Couldn't agree with you more, Sean. Diane says, when have they ever taken accountability for not carrying out our wishes and actually working against us? They are a threat to the people. Neil says, classic Labour. Let me guess, the slogan for your next campaign will be, it was all Trump's fault. Oh, no. It will be. That's what they're going to claim. Barney says their job is to mitigate as quickly as possible the negative impacts of a crisis on the citizens, not just complain about the situation and do nothing. Jack says net zero is supposed to protect us from this. I know. That's the claim. Don't work out that way. What with, reality. And Nina says, does blaming Trump help the UK out of the crisis? We need energy independence. That would be a good start. And Yasmin says, Labour, we did not plan for this. Sounds like very poor governance. And Brian says, I guess their solution would be to take us back into the EU. Nailed it. Because, of course, the EU is doing so well at the moment. If you look at the IMF forecast, by the way, it's only the oil exporters on the other side of the Atlantic who are doing well. Let's go to your calls on other issues, actually. George is in Dundee and wants to talk about migration. There's 10,000 asylum seekers, illegal migrants being moved out of hotels, but still on our streets. George, what do you want to say?
It's the migration and the economy, Julia. I phoned your station for a few years now saying that there will become a tipping point where the British public will realise that their standard of living will be reduced and reduced for a long, long, long time. These people are coming into our country, mostly they've contributed nothing, they will contribute nothing, and we will be paying for them for the next 40 or 50 years. The compounding effect of that on benefits and pensions is incredible. We are now talking about our public having their state pension means tested and having their disability benefits reduced. The starting point is reducing immigration. This is like going to the doctor and saying, Doctor, I've got cold feet. I've suffered from cold feet for years. I've tried everything. What have you tried? I've tried putting a coat on. I've tried putting a hat on. I've tried putting the heating up. What about putting a pair of socks on? What about putting a pair of socks on?
It's that basic. I couldn't agree with you more, George. It is that basic. Just fine. Why do you think they don't get it? Is it just their ideological, blinkers they've got on, immigration, diversity good, human rights, all of that, and they literally just don't see it? Is it they don't feel it? What is it?
I'll tell you what it is, Julia. You were on the Heretics YouTube channel, and there was a guy on there who described it as, in this world, there is somewhere people and anywhere people. Most of the elite and the well-to-do can go anywhere and live their lives. It won't affect them. I am a somewhere person.
Absolutely.
I am a Dundonian, and I want Dundee to look like Dundee and me to get what I've paid into this society.
I couldn't agree with you more. Again, I'm probably in a job where I could actually be an area person, but I love my country, and and again, my affinity to my country, affinity to what is great about this country and our history and our, I believe, great future. It overrides all of that. Oh, George, wonderful call. Thank you so much. David's on the line in Sheffield. David, you want to talk about that conversation we had about the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, saying that the NHS has got this massive misogynistic culture because women aren't getting treated as soon as they want to be treated or how they want to be treated on the NHS. What do you make of that claim?
Well, the thing what struck me about it is every time that a government minister comes on, he's solving a problem by creating a problem. In other words, NHS is screwed, so we've got to have problems in NHS. My question would be to West, whatever his name is, why aren't the people in the NHS already doing the jobs? Because NHS executives get paid an absolute fortune to sit in minutes, to decide this, to decide that, but they're not deciding, according to West Streeting, the problems that's actually affecting.
Well, as I said to our GP, who's arguing about this misogyny, and I don't think it uniquely affects women, and therefore, and it's not motivated by hatred of women, it's just bad management and bad training.
But the thing about it is, there's been a trade union, a strong trade union, apparently, in NHS for years and years and years, and not one of them's come out and said, we've done surveys, and I used to be a trade unionist, so I know that they do these surveys, and they talk to people within there and find out the problems, that there's a specific problem with misogyny. Right? Because what happens, what you've got a right to do as a trade unionist is go to your trade union representative and raise it. How many people's actually done it?
Well, exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's happening again, and when they don't tackle the real issues of misogyny, which is like forcing female nurses to get changed in front of male doctors who are claiming they're women. David, thank you for that. 11:35 is the time. We're going to get a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to independent economist Julian Jessup. Let's hope his abacus is working better than Rachel Reeves. Tell us what should be done to improve our economic outlook. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:37 is the time. Let's talk about the economy. Yay, always a happy subject to talk about these days, isn't it? Julian Jessup joins us, he's an independent economist. Julian, just checking, have you got a working abacus, my love?
Yes, I do.
Thank God,
in the corner.
because we're very, very worried that the person who's apparently in charge of our economy does not. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. We were told yesterday by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, that in terms of their growth forecast, that the UK is going to face the biggest economic shock in the G7 this year. We've seen our growth, which was pitiful in terms of the forecast, of 1.3% downgraded to 0.8%. One of the highest inflation, the smallest increase in living standards. I'm amazed there's going to be any increase in living standards personally. But crucially, the fund's chief economist blames our downgrade on our reliance on gas imports, our lack of storage of gas, weak growth as a result of the Chancellor's £30 billion tax rate. The Chancellor apparently, though, thinks it's all down to the folly, in her words, of Donald Trump's war and no plan. And the solution is more net zero. As an independent economist, is that the solution?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, first of all, the numbers are even worse than you suggested. If you adjust for the growth of the population, then the economy is expected to increase this year by just 0.3%.
So this is when you do it per capita. So we've got more people, so of course it'll grow a bit more. But once you actually allow for the extra number of people it has to be shared out among, it's worse.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that touches a point that you were discussing earlier and your callers were mentioning, which is why the government is so keen on lots of immigration, is because that boosts the headline numbers. But it doesn't help living standards on average for people who are already here.
And especially, by the way, given that most of those people who are coming in are not net contributors, they're low wage, low skill, often not even earning at all.
Yeah, I mean, the pattern is shifting a little bit. The government is cracking down and making it harder for some people to come here than otherwise. So the picture's a little bit better, but the reality is that an enormous number of people have come here who aren't necessarily contributing as much, but they are putting additional pressure on public sector infrastructure and hospitals and schools and so on. So there's definitely a question mark over that. As far as the energy policy issue is concerned, I think net zero is clearly a problem. And I think the broader issue here is we've become too ideological about this. So if you are left wing, you favour more solar and wind. If you're right wing, you want to get more oil out of the North Sea and fracking and so on. The reality, though, is that in a sense it doesn't matter. We want more domestic energy, and I don't really care where it comes from.
Well, no, hold on a minute. That's all very well, apart from the fact that you ain't going to be using solar power or wind power to actually heat our homes with gas. That doesn't create gas, which we need to heat our homes and to run our factories. There's lots of stuff that we rely on gas and oil for the vast majority of our energy needs. That's not going to be replaced in the next few decades.
Well, I mean, to be absolutely clear, I think that's correct, but I think the market can work it out for itself. So what the government is doing is trying to direct the supply of energy from one source to another. So it's actually closing the door to more production from the North Sea, both oil and gas, which I think is daft. It's clear that companies want to extract more oil and gas from the North Sea, and as long as they're paying the appropriate price to do so, then that seems a sensible solution.
And yet we seem to be constantly told there are two things by Energy Secretary Ed Miliband. Well, there isn't, there's barely anything left in the oil in the North Sea, even though most of the gas that we are actually importing we get from Norway, from exactly the same seabed as we would be extracting it from. But also that, well, there's no benefit to us getting it locally from the North Sea and us, because there's an international price. It won't bring down prices. And yet, yet the IMF make it really clear. We face a reliance on gas ports and lack of storage, and therefore we are actually paying more for our gas. So how come every other country that exports gas and oil gets an economic benefit from it, but we uniquely wouldn't?
Yeah, well, there are two problems with what Ed Miliband and others are saying. The first is
one, it's untrue.
It's untrue in two ways, and I'll explain both of them. One is the argument that there's no North Sea oil and gas left. Well, if so, why worry? Why not, just grant the licenses, and if companies decide there's none to produce, then none will be produced. Let the market decide that. And I'm sure that at current high levels of prices, there would be and more scope to increase production from there. The second point is this idea that there's a sort of global price for energy that we can't influence. I mean, A, that's not true, but even if it were, it wouldn't matter, because it's still better to produce that oil from the North Sea in terms of tax revenues and jobs and security than it is to import it elsewhere. So at the moment, we're importing a lot of oil and gas from countries like Norway, from exactly the same place. It's all from the North Sea, but it's Norway that's benefiting it from rather than us. So
and it's actually cleaner for us to get it from a pipe from the North Sea than have a liquefied natural gas coming from either America or the Gulf, which there's actually it is a huge amount of extra resources and extra CO2 emissions if you care about these things. I don't. As a result of that and shipping it to this country. This is the thing. I mean, you say it's ideological. I mean, it's just not fact-based. Do you think, I mean, I've always said that net zero doesn't survive contact with reality. I'm amazed by how long it has survived. We've still got, you know, the Energy Secretary, the Chancellor, the Prime Minister, they all talk a good game on this. I don't think that most of them actually are signed up to this. I think they're beginning to realise this is insane, it doesn't work, and it's going to cost them the next election, this alone. Do you think there is a wake-up call? I mean, you've got the Greens who are pushing ahead with just utter nonsense policies on this. I mean, they literally want to basically, you know, abolish energy. I mean, good luck with that. We'll all be back living in caves, but I don't think they'd get re-elected a second time if they did get elected. But do you think that people are getting to grips with this? Because you've got, you know, TMB Union, you know, they're not on the right, they're on the left, and they're saying this is crazy. You've got a lot of quite senior, well-respected Labour figures saying we need to get on top of this now. Do you think that actually the tide is really, really turning?
I think it is. I think people are recognising the trade-offs. So I'm personally happy to leave climate science to the climate scientists. So if they say there's a problem, fair enough. But the question is, how do you deal with that? And that's where I think economists should have more say. So yes, we could significantly reduce our carbon emissions over the next few years by crashing the economy.
Yeah. That's mostly how we've done it. When we have we just simply offshored all our manufacturing. Brilliant. So. Yeah. Brilliant. It's all just being produced in China. In no way is the... It's
completely pointless. It doesn't, for a start, meet any of the climate change objectives because, you know, we're just, as you say, shifting production to other countries around the world who are even less worried about the environment than we are. But also, it sends a terrible message to other countries. You know, if Ed Miliband often says that, you know, producing more North Sea oil and gas would tend to set a terrible signal to other countries. But actually the opposite. I mean, partly because our failure to do so is damaging our own economy.
Well, indeed. And let's
also, that ship has sailed. Other countries are already backtracking on net zero.
Absolutely, because there is, you can look at the international graphs. There is not a single country in the world that has ever, or even now, has a high energy costs, which are the result of net zero policies and a successful economy. It is as simple as that. Just finally, I want to ask you, we've had George Robertson, the former NATO Secretary General, former Defence Secretary, and he's talking about we need to spend more on defence, which I undoubtedly agree with, but also saying we cannot have a country that is safe when we are spending more than 5 times on welfare than we are on defence. Universal credit, the latest figures in full-blown crisis, according to the Tories. We've now got 1.5 million more people, not just 1.5, but 1.5 million more people now claiming universal credit. The vast majority of those not working at all. None of this nonsense, working families, rubbish. Most of these people are not working at all. 8.4 million people of working age getting that benefit. We've got numerous others, of course, that get the disability aspect of those claims as well. But this is unsustainable, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, something is clearly wrong here. My view is that there are certain things that only the government can do, and they include things like defence and the criminal justice system. And we've underinvested, we've underspent in this area, not just under Labour, but under previous Conservative governments as well. That's what the government should be focused on. Instead, we got into this trap where the government is expected to bail everybody out, whatever the problem, and the benefit bill has risen, and there's going to be a lot of pressure for energy bailouts if energy prices remain high. That's not really the government's job. The government should get back to basics, and one of the essential basics, of course, is the defence of the country.
Absolutely. Independent economist Julian Jessup, thank you so much for that. Quick word from Claire Pearson on that.
Julian's always very sensible to listen to, and I think he's right. When you look at climate change, the effect that all of the net zero laws have had on businesses wanting to set up in this country is so enormous. The AI company that pulled out only a couple of weeks ago of having a data centre here because the energy costs are so sky high.
Which, by the way, I predicted. I said we're not going to have an AI revolution if energy prices are too high. What a surprise. So we'd have lots and lots of workers, wouldn't we? Because we've got all those immigrants who are all working so hard. Oh, no, they're not. We're paying for all their accommodation and their benefits. And in particular, we're paying for the accommodation of the migrants who've arrived on boats. Going to talk about that up next, with 10,000 migrants moved out of hotels, the asylum hotels we've been paying for, into, let's face it, cheaper local accommodation, bedsits and the like, but they are still here. Is that something to cheer about? We'll talk about that with David Shipley up next. This is Talk. Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive. We've been looking at...
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back to the show, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:51 is the time. Claire Pearsall is still here. And right now, delighted to be joined in the studio by investigative journalist on crime and justice issues, David Shipley. A very good morning to you. We often talk to you about prisons issues, but you've been covering crime issues for a long time as well. And we undoubtedly do have a very big issue in terms of the criminality of people arriving in our country, on our shores, paying the people smugglers and arriving here, claiming to be asylum seekers. Tens of thousands of them put up in asylum hotels. We've seen numerous protests, and obviously this has made life difficult. The last Conservative government and this Labour government. So the solution is move them out of the hotels, and Labour has managed to move 10,000 migrants out of asylum hotels since December, down from 30-odd thousand to almost 21,000, closing 11 more hotels, largely moved into bedsits, some into some of these big ex-barracks. Problem solved, right, David?
Well, I think maybe the government believes it's solving the problem because I think they've become fixated on the idea that the hotels are the issue. Probably because
the hotels are the problem, not the illegal migrants.
I think they're convinced the hotels are the problem. What people are angry about is we're putting asylum seekers in hotels. When I think actually what people are upset about is that there are many asylum seekers who arrive in the country illegally, many of whom are committing horrific crimes, and they are making us all less safe. And
I mean, there is an issue we have in terms of the cost of those hotels. I mean, when we found out people were being put in, 4-star hotels, when people's weddings are cancelled because the hotel has now become what's called a private hotel. It's just full of asylum seekers, 4 to a room. People are understandably peeved.
Of course, and I think they'll equally be peeved when local rents get driven up because the state is buying up all these houses and converting them from family dwellings into houses of multiple.
And by the way, they're getting permission from councils to do that rather more easily than local people can. But we do know that they are paying above market rent. So there's no incentive for landlords to say, no, I won't. And they're guaranteeing deposits, rent, refurbishment, everything. I mean, paid for by us.
Yeah. And if you look at the companies that operate this, they make a huge fortune every year from housing people who arrived illegally. So it's an astonishing, and that's all being paid for by us, the taxpayers. It's a huge transfer of money from taxpayers to private companies, so we can live alongside lots of people who we don't want to be.
And have less availability of housing for us.
And more crime.
But again, people obviously say, well, these houses are multiple occupancy. Families aren't living in those. Well, actually, an awful lot of families end up living in bedsit. A lot of young people trying to make their way, young workers, are living in these sorts of homes. And they are competing for these flats. Often they have flats, 2 or 3 people maybe in a flat, but that's a flat that could have been used by a young family.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's just another example, I think, of how the state, when it has to prioritise who's important, it puts British people at the very bottom.
And we see that again and again, and also those people who are looking for those homes and being priced out of them are also paying the taxes to fund for someone else to pay a higher market rent. I mean, that's the thing. There is no incentive for landlords to say no to these people. But yes, you're right. I think the government does think that the problem is the hotels because we've had these very visible protests, and people understand, people are concerned, and you can't just paint all these lovely young women, and grandmas and children wearing pink t-shirts as far-right bigots. They're not throwing bricks. They're having a legitimate concern about 14-year-olds being raped by men who was living in some of these asylum hotels. And we know there is a criminality rate that is, is a concern for local people. But we're going to be less safe, aren't we, if we don't know where these men are? And they are largely all young men. If they're just living in a bedsit 2 up from you, you can't warn your kids to avoid that hotel because they're in the same street as you.
Exactly, and actually, even if they're on the military bases, they're not actually being held there. So I think this is really important. The Home Office loses track of asylum seekers quite often. They wander off from the hotel or the HMO or the military base, often because actually they've been brought here by organised crime and they're going off to work in the criminal environment which they've been brought here to.
Which also damages British people because they undercut minimum wage.
So it's a completely insecure process. If we were doing this properly, if we were going to have an asylum system at all, we would intern everyone on arrival somewhere secure.
Works for me. Works for me. I tell you what also is fascinating is people who do arrive here legally on a visa and a BBC investigation. Gotta love the BBC discovering this. I think it makes them far-right bigots, though. I hate to tell you, because it turns out they now think that not every asylum seeker is legitimate. I know, it's
shocked.
Absolutely shocking. I'm really upset with you, the BBC. You disappointed me. But they've found that there's a shadow industry of law firms and advisors, often from charities, paid for with our taxpayers' money, charging thousands of pounds to help migrants pretend to be gay in order to stay in the UK. It's a major undercover investigation, but basically a migrant's visa runs out, and then they basically told how to go and get, go along to a gay pride parade, go to a club. I don't know why you have to pay someone thousands of pounds to do that. They're certainly making out these migrants are somehow victims doing it. No, they're choosing to break the law to stay in the country they're no longer allowed to be in, and they've got apparently thousands of pounds to pay these law firms who are acting completely illegally, and charities, by telling people to deliberately mislead the authorities. Clear criminal offences taking place, but I'm not quite sure why you need to pay someone to give you advice about, I don't know, producing some evidence that you may or may not be gay when you're not.
Well, I think it sounds like they actually produce fake documents as well. So they'll forge letters from gay lovers to say I'm the lover of this man, and he's scared of going home, and they'll encourage the migrants to go to the doctor and say they're depressed. In one case, one pretended to be HIV positive in order to bolster his claim of being gay, and it's I think it's one of those things which has been an open secret for a long time. I understand from stuff I've seen online this morning that there's been even a wave of fake asylum seekers joining the LGBT Conservatives group within the Tory party as a way of proving that
well,
they
they said
are.
we had, supposedly converting to Christianity, and therefore I can't go back.
Converting to the Conservative Party,
a step too far, Claire. A step too far. But they're taking the mick out of us, and they've got a load of organisations that are helping them do it. Where are the prosecutions? The BBC can find these people, can't the Home Office?
And the Home Office has said this really bold statement saying anyone who is caught doing this will be prosecuted, will be deported. And
no, they won't.
Of course they won't. But I think also it's not even necessary. Do I blame the migrants? I do obviously blame the migrants, but actually fundamentally we've built a system where the incentives make this likely, right? And actually we've got a system which is biased towards just always saying yes. We've developed a culture where we find the idea of saying no to people, establishing boundaries.
Well, you say we. No, the lanyard class house, the rest of us have no issue at all. That's why all their kids are so badly behaved and ours aren't. No, but it's true.
Well, this is the state we live in, right?
This is the state we live in. But again, everyone, again, all people are gay, so they can't get back. I'm sorry, but for most of the existence on the planet, unfortunately, people have had to hide being gay. I'm not entirely sure we take the entire gay population of the world from third world countries.
Of course not, but also, I think it's a couple of things. So first of all, it's completely unfalsifiable. So,
yeah.
And if we are going to grant asylum on the basis of claims which we can never prove to be untrue, we're obviously going to be taken advantage of. But also, it's not even that long ago that even Labour ministers were saying this was nonsense. 2008, Jackie Smith was Home Secretary.
So it wasn't happening. But it's like people marrying for the fake British passport as well. David Shipley, always great to get you in the studio. Quick word from Claire Pearsall, response to that.
Yeah, I mean, none of this is new when it comes to...
Ex-Home Office.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it, whether it's your religion, your marital status or your sexuality, there will always be people gaming the system.
Yeah, and we allow them to do it. And again, and the human rights lawyers are part of it. And again, everyone needs to be prosecuted. I mean, again, there's no point prosecuting them because they'll come before judges who apparently think that everyone and his dog should be allowed in this country. This is extraordinary. David Shipley, thank you so much for coming in. Claire Pearsall will stay with me, and also Peter Cobb will be in to take PMQs coming up in just a few moments. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 2 minutes past midday is the time. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is fabulous to have your company. Any moment now, we're going to go live to Prime Minister's questions, where Keir Starmer's already on his feet. We'll go to him when get the first couple of questions, usually rather irrelevant. And we'll get Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, on her feet. Director say Claire Pearsall still joins me, former Conservative government advisor, and Peter Cardwell, Talk presenter.
Hello
Always
there.
good to get you in the studio. I miss you during Easter recess when that lot are all off sunning themselves and doing things, so we don't get to have PMQs and discuss it. What do you think Kemi's going to go with? Because it's local elections.
I think defence spending, possibly. I think, given the comments of
Claire
Lord Robertson.
is nodding. Yes, that's that's quite a damning one, isn't it? Oh, I think she's already on her feet. So we will be going to her, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and everything. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's go across to House of Commons right now.
Mr. Speaker, that was a very interesting answer from the Prime Minister. Lord Robertson, who authored the government's Strategic Defence Review, has said the Prime Minister has a corrosive complacency when it comes to defence. Why did he say that?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying I respect Lord Robertson, and I thank him again. I thank him again for carrying out the Strategic Review. My responsibility is to keep the British people safe, and that is a duty I take seriously. That is why I don't agree with his comments. Last February, that was 7 months after taking office, I took the decision to increase defence spending from 2.3 to 2.6%, paid for by a difficult decision on overseas aid. Last June, at the NATO summit, I committed to raising core defence spending to 3.5%. Last November, Mr. Speaker, the budget committed record funding to defence. I reaffirm those commitments now. The Strategic Defence Review is a 10-year blueprint for national security. The Defence Investment Plan will put that into effect. It will be published as soon as possible. We need to get it right. We inherited plans that were uncosted and undeliverable, and we're not going to repeat those mistakes.
Mr. Speaker, he says he doesn't agree with Lord Robertson. Lord Robertson is a former Labour Defence Secretary, a former NATO Secretary General. He also said, and I quote, "We are underprepared, we are underinsured, we are under attack." He said...
Order. Sorry? Yeah. I don't think it looks good, shouting somebody down at the dispatch box.
Mr. Speaker, Lord Robertson's criticisms were of the Prime Minister, and he said Britain's national security is in peril. Our armed forces are at the end of their tether, waiting for this government to fund the Strategic Defence Review. There are still 2 weeks of the parliamentary session left, so why won't the Prime Minister publish the Defence Investment Plan before then?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I remind the House that we put in place the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War. Mr. Speaker, let me spell that out. That means we're spending £270 billion over this Parliament. That's £5 billion more this year, with defence funding increasing every year. These are record amounts, Mr. Speaker, decisions of a Labour Prime Minister, a Labour Chancellor and a Labour government. And what a contrast. When they came into office, defence spending was 2.5%. When they left, it was 2.3%. When they came into office, the army was 100,000. When they left office, 72,000. They cut frigates and destroyers by 25%. They cut mine hunters by 50%. She said at the weekend, our defence is the weakest for 400 years. That is what they left behind.
Mr. Speaker, he's talking about the biggest sustained increase. Talking about an increase is not the same as giving an increase. The military and the defence industry want to hear about what he's going to do, not him prosecuting past governments. He promised the Defence Investment Plan would be published. He promised that the Defence Investment Plan would be published last autumn. I asked him at PMQs 6 weeks ago when it would be published, he had no idea. It is now the middle of April. What's the hold-up?
Mr. Speaker, I've set out my position. The Defence Investment Plan is the first line-by-line review of defence budgets for 18 years. She talks about talking. If you're going to support and make your country safe, you have to get the right calls on the big issues. She called for us to jump into the war. They can pretend otherwise. I remember walking in, standing here for the first time, saying we would not get drawn into the war, we would not join the offensive, and they all shouted, shame. They remember it. I remember it. They're just embarrassed by it now. A week later, when she realised she'd made a massive error of judgment, she attempted the mother of all U-turns. That didn't work. So this weekend she said, when I said we should jump into the war, she said this weekend, Mr. Speaker, that what she meant, she was talking about verbal support.
Prime Minister, it's Prime Minister's questions. We've got to concentrate.
Just answer the question.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister loves to misrepresent my position on Iran. So he does. He loves to misrepresent it. Let's stop talking about what I didn't say. Let's start talking about what he isn't doing. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that on Monday, I offered to work with the Prime Minister to identify the welfare savings we need. What did he say? No thanks. Now that Lord Robertson has said, and I quote, we cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare budget. Will the Prime Minister think again and work with us to find savings to fund defence?
Prime Minister. She was clear in what she was saying. She said we should give verbal support. I suppose that's standing on the side and saying, get in there, good luck, mate, you've got this. Mr. Speaker, that is her approach. We are reforming welfare and spending more on defence. They did neither. The welfare bill rose by £88 billion on their watch. It soared by £33 billion under the Shadow Chancellor's watch. We're fixing it. What did they do? They voted against it. They voted to keep the broken system. So taking advice from the party opposite on reforming welfare and defence spending is like asking Liz Truss how to keep your mortgage down.
This is so poor from the Prime Minister. This is Labour MPs are laughing. Labour MPs are laughing, Mr. Speaker. This is a moment of profound national seriousness. And what are they doing? They're promoting sex toys in Parliament. That's what they're doing. Mr. Speaker, it gives a whole new meaning to fiddling while Rome burns. Mr. Speaker, that's what they're doing, Mr. Speaker. Let's get back to the issue of the Defence Investment Plan and defence spending. It is being reported that the Treasury is asking the MOD to make £3.5 billion worth of cuts this year. He won't fund our military because he wants to fund more welfare. That's why he has a welfare plan to 2031, but no defence investment plan at all. Now that the Chagos surrender deal is dead, will the Prime Minister put the billions saved from ditching Chagos into defence, or is that going into welfare as well?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are spending more on defence. Record amounts on defence. £270 billion in this Parliament, £5 billion extra. And she talks about the Chancellor. It's because of the decisions of this Chancellor we've got the biggest boost to defence spending since the Cold War. We've also got the biggest pay rise for our armed forces for over 20 years. We've also got the biggest investment in military housing for over half a century. What did they do at the budget? They voted against all of that.
Very weak.
That sounds like he doesn't want to spend the Chagos money on defence. But, Mr. Speaker, Labour MPs will know Lord Robertson, a former Defence Secretary, a former NATO Secretary General. He is Labour through and through. They all need to think about why he stuck his head above the parapet. I went through the Strategic Defence Review with Lord Robertson last year. The Lib Dems and Reform refused to meet him. No other party is taking this seriously. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Prime Minister a very specific question. In January 2024, Conservatives approved an upgrade of destroyers like HMS Dragon so they can better intercept ballistic missiles. In July 2024, the Prime Minister paused that plan. Will he immediately approve and fund that critical upgrade now?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Dragon was commissioned by a Labour government, as it happened. But she stands and says, please forget the fact that we hollowed out the armed forces. Please clear up our mess. I went to the Gulf last week and thanked our armed forces for protecting British lives. She said we should have jumped into the war without thinking about the consequences. Then said, oh no, we shouldn't be in the war the next week. Now she says, what I meant was we should give verbal support.
Order. The front bench, I expect them to be quiet here. I also expect it, but it's the same people. I suspect next week you won't be in for PMQs if it carries on. Prime Minister.
In addition to saying her position is we should just say to Americans, get in there, she insulted our armed forces, Mr. Speaker, saying that they were just hanging around. These were pilots who, within 2 hours of this conflict, were up risking their lives, taking missiles out of the sky, and she insulted them. And she's never apologised for that. She said a few weeks ago that serious times call for serious people. She is not one of them.
Ian Byrne.
Well, let's come back out of the House of Commons now. I suppose my response to that PMQs exchange, particularly the Prime Minister's response, is just, what was that? I mean, that was among the things that our Prime Minister is incredibly bad at. I think on any objective ruling is answering questions at PMQs. I mean, he got told off by the Speaker at one point simply for, asking questions, basically, of Kemi Badenoch, and I'm going, oh, this is PMQs questions, crucially. Didn't answer the final question. I don't think he answered any of the actual direct questions that Kemi Badenoch put to him, Peter Cobwell. Look, I'm not saying any of us, card-carrying Labour Party members and fully support, but we always try and give a very honest appraisal in terms of who won, who didn't. Sometimes you go, Kemi Badenoch did a bad one or middle of the road. But I mean, I think she went in pretty strong, some pretty good, solid defence. If you're quoting Lord Robertson now, as she pointed out, former Labour Defence Secretary, Labour through and through, as she said in her final question, former NATO Secretary General, who trusted by the Prime Minister to write his own Strategic Defence Review only last year. The idea that he's not a credible person to be making his concerns public in a speech yesterday, and we covered it on the show extensively, about the peril, in his words, that we are in on defence spending and our ability to defend our country and project hard as well as soft power abroad. I mean, I just completely and utterly batted away by the Prime Minister, but no point at answering the direct issue.
He essentially said, I disagree with Lord Robertson, but didn't say why. He didn't point out why. He made some criticism of the Conservatives.
Why the man who knows loads more than me on this subject is wrong.
Who I trusted to do this review is wrong, and was saying to the Prime Minister behind the scenes on numerous occasions, you need to do something about this. Then he goes public. In the last 15 years, I can't remember hearing any criticism of any government, Conservative or Labour, really, from Lord Robertson, and the fact that he's done this. Also interesting, I think...
But he stays studiously politically neutral. He's a big beast. He's a proper player.
Now that he's NATO, absolutely, or now that he is a former NATO Secretary General. 2 points I would make about today. One, with the substance, you're absolutely right, Julia. The tone was fascinating. Keir Starmer on the back foot, very annoyed. Kemi Badenoch, as we were told back in the day when we were training to be journalists, Julia, if something's sensational, you don't need to sensationalise it. Kemi Badenoch, very quiet, very deliberate, very straightforward. Does the Prime Minister think this is what George Robertson said, and did very well? And the final thing that I think was fascinating about today, who wasn't there? Where's John Healey? He's in Germany.
Secretary.
Why is the Defence Secretary in Germany? Because he's giving a package of 120,000 cutting-edge drones to Ukraine. Okay, I'm not saying we shouldn't support Ukraine, but maybe we should support our own country first. And that is just a striking illustration.
I think we should be doing both. I think we support you. I think we support Britain by supporting Ukraine. Claire Pistol, look, I think Kemi Badenoch made a good fist of that. That said, there is a fair point to be made by the Prime Minister, which is, you're having a go at me for not increasing defence spending, and absolutely we should do, But I mean, the Iran conflict has happened under his watch. But Ukraine didn't happen under the Labour watch. It happened under the Tory watch. But the Tories don't have a very good story to tell in terms of what the Conservatives have done in government over many years in terms of their spending on defence.
No, and this is why I think this was a misstep actually from Kemi Badenoch to go on defence spending, because all you're doing is highlighting the fact that a Conservative administration also did not fund the defence sector correctly, did not look after our armed forces in the way that we should have done. I think she was wrong to go on that. I can understand her need to do it.
But you were nodding when Peter Cardwell said he thought she would go on defence. You were nodding that you thought she was going to go on defence.
Yeah, because Lord Robertson, being such the Labour bigwig that he is, and his comments about corrosive complacency are too good to miss. But I think she needs to turn that story around a little bit more. The delayed defence investment plan needed to be actually probably a little bit more pushed than she did.
It's a little bit complicated, isn't it? Strategic Defence Review, investment plan. People go, well, and also even when politicians talk about percentage increases and billions, frankly, an awful lot of people just glaze over, don't really know what percentages are. It's a bit meaningless.
It is, but it is one of those things that, again, the Prime Minister promised something that hasn't delivered. Now, she could make
That's
more
not like
of
the
this.
Prime Minister.
And for him to turn around and suggest that the Conservatives and Kemi Badenoch had U-turned when Peter and I have a discrepancy here of 16 or 17 times that the Prime Minister has U-turned.
It's hard to keep up.
And it is actually quite, it's quite the gall of the man to accuse Kemi Badenoch of U-turning.
He did it with Nigel Farage recently as well. He accused Nigel Farage of being a U-turner.
Takes
one to know one, man.
He thinks that he's kind of owning that. Like, no, you're not. You're really, really not. But here's the thing: the ins and outs of how much is being spent on defence by the political party. I think everyone's agreed we ain't spending enough on defence. I mean, apart from the Greens and the far left who think you shouldn't spend anything on it, and we just all sing kumbaya as the Russian tanks, roll in. I mean, these people are just crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. Serious people know we've not been spending enough on defence for a long time, and we certainly aren't now. The thing is, when the Prime Minister says they're going to be spending more over this Parliament, record amounts, but they're actually asking for a cut in defence spending from the Defence Department of 3.5 billion this year. These are huge sums of money. But here's the key thing: is that fundamentally this isn't about like whether you prioritise this or prioritise that. This is about the realpolitik of we couldn't defend an RAF base when the Iranians attacked. Whether you want to be involved in the Iran conflict, whether you want to side with Donald Trump or not, and you want to call it, as Rachel Reeves has done today, or interview yesterday's folly of the Iran conflict, doesn't matter. You're going to be impacted by it anyway, economically and indeed, as we saw, physically as well at an RAF base. We didn't have the wherewithal in terms of our military capability to defend our base, and we don't have the wherewithal to help clear the Strait of Hormuz. We are not taken seriously on the world stage, as Tim Collins, former colonel in the Iraq War, made that wonderfully, extraordinary, inspiring speech back in 2003 to the British forces there. We're not taken seriously soft powers because we can't back it up. This isn't about spending this much or that much. This is about the realpolitik of we are no longer a player on the world stage.
We're not taken seriously.
We cannot defend ourselves or our allies.
And it's for a number of reasons. If Javier Milei decided right now to invade the Falklands, we couldn't defend them. Yep. The cuts that they want from defence, and they are real term cuts, that amount of money, it's exactly the same as what the welfare bill is going to go up by. Yeah. That is what they need that money for, and it's very, very clear. And on the world stage, another thing yesterday, the IMF downgrading our growth by 0.5%, the lowest growth forecast in the G7. We're not a serious nation anymore. Keir Starmer knows that. He's trying to cover up.
Does he know it? Here's the thing. Do you think he knows it? Because I worry that I know Ed Miliband's delusional. I mean, Rachel Reeves just can't add up properly. But do you think I genuinely do worry that he doesn't have a view on anything, other than human rights, law, good, migrant diversity, good, and everything else bad. But do you think that he does actually know that?
I think he does. He doesn't want to admit it, and he certainly doesn't know how to deal with it. So he'll push it under the carpet by leaving the country and going off on yet another foreign jaunt.
He could set up another committee and go to another conference.
Absolutely.
That'll solve things.
Let's go to Saudi Arabia. Let's go to Qatar. Let's be a peacemaker, and then come home the day before the peace talks actually start.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. Again, not a player. But here's the thing. He knows, whether he acknowledges it or not, that there ain't any money I mean, okay,
Yes.
we say you can't put taxes up anymore. I would have said that a few years ago under the Tories and under Labour. We've seen taxes going up. There's still taxes, the thresholds and all of that. Put national insurance up for employers. I think easily a technical breach of the manifesto commitment not to put it up. It does affect workers. All these other taxes, £30 billion tax take last time went up. That's taxes going up under any stretch of the imagination. But you can't borrow anymore. Our borrowing costs are, I mean, goodness God, they're higher than Greece's, for goodness sake. A complete basket case economy. They had to be helped out by the EU and had technocrats put in charge because their politicians couldn't be trusted. Maybe we should think about that. Oh, go back into the EU. There's an idea. Anyway, but sorry, my mind wandered for a moment. But we do. We don't have any money. How much more can you tax? I mean, certainly. I mean, absolutely. There aren't that many billionaires to tax, and they'll all leave. We can't borrow anymore. So the only thing there is cutting. He has a whole load of backbenchers. He can do anything he wants, Peter. He's got 400 Labour MPs. The trouble is they won't let him cut things like the NHS, like welfare. The ballooning welfare bill, the triple lock on pensions, you name it. And his hands are completely tied. And he isn't enough of a statesman, he isn't enough of a leader, hasn't got enough, steel in his own spine to tell his party as well as the country how bad things are and what needs to be done.
He's not a leader. What you need from a leader is some degree of competence and some degree of hope. You need a plan as well. You need someone to say, look, as David Cameron, not a perfect prime minister, but he said, I've diagnosed the problem, we're in serious economic difficulty, here is my solution. Now, I'm not sure austerity actually worked, but at least he had a plan.
It was the same spending as the Labour Chancellor at the time, Alistair Darling, had foreseen.
I mean, I'm not sure that Keir Starmer has a plan for anything. No. I think he's a reactive Prime Minister. I think he does what people tell him to do.
Well, you say he's reactive, but he's a slow reactor.
Yes,
he's the worst.
Exactly. No, indeed. Julia, the joke you found particularly funny from
yes, can you explain to people the sex toys joke?
So there's a Labour MP who says that she wants a big debate about sex toys and about basically sex education and wants to talk about it in Parliament. Kemi Badenoch then made a very funny reference. I am in direct contact with the person who wrote the joke, and he has told me that another rejected joke was, as heating bills rise, at least one Labour MP is promoting novel ways to stay warm.
Oh, good Lord. Well, the joke was, she basically said, a moment of profound national, seriousness. She says, they're talking about, sex toys. She says it gives a whole new meaning to fiddling while Rome burns, which I thought was a little bit on the risque side of the jokes. And again, you kind of have to know an awful lot of the background to find that funny.
It reminds me of when Theresa May talked about campaigning. Do you remember that one? Where she knocked the door of a caravan and people were basically, she said they were enjoying themselves and involving a deep and special partnership, which is of course how she talked about the EU. It was very funny.
I blocked that horror from my mind. In terms of who won, I think all three of us think Kemi Badenoch won.
I think she was better. She was absolutely better.
He is so on the ropes. That's the trouble. He is so on the ropes. He's got a very sticky wicket. I think, but your lot, they would be on the ropes as well. The same. I have a funny feeling they'd be making a lot of the same terrible decisions.
Yes,
because that welfare bill ballooned under the Tory party after 2019.
But at least we can speak properly, and I think this is what the Prime Minister has. He has that robotic Dalek way, and he gets really upset, and then he backtracks on everything. The Tories are much better at being questioned.
I find it extraordinary how irritated he gets about being asked any questions. He must be an absolute nightmare at home. He's got a really strange attitude.
Thin skin.
Very, very thin skin, hasn't he? And amazingly, still blows my mind, apparently was a successful lawyer before he became a director of public prosecutions and then Labour leader and our Prime Minister. Blows my mind. I genuinely, I would literally just, find someone's cat to represent me in court over that man. I really would. If that's what he's like, with a prepared set of answers, how on earth does he cope with a cross-examination?
They always said he was better with judges than with juries.
Absolutely bizarre. 12:26. Peter, absolutely fantastic to have you in. Apparently, we're just told that Keir Starmer has told the Commons he's he's not going to yield. I'm sure he said, let me be very clear, I'm not going to yield to pressure from Donald Trump over the Iran war. This after the President, in a conversation with Sky News, said he could change the terms of the US-UK trade deal. I'm pretty sure that trade deal still hasn't come into force anyway.
I think you're right.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, difficult to keep up, but there we are. When are you next on air, my lovely?
7 o'clock this evening.
Excellent. Can't wait. Show going fantastically well. Claire Pearson, she's next on air after the next break. This is Talk. Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at. I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. It's coming up to 12:30. Let's get to a quick call or two, if we can, before we basically talk to our, the next guest, former Conservative Party leader, Sir Ian Doug Smith. He enjoyed a few PMQs in his time, didn't he? Let's go to David, who is in Exeter. David, you want to talk about defence, but in particular that exchange between the Prime Minister and Kemi Badenoch.
I do. Critical, really, because the Starmer has made it very clear there at the dispatch box, despite Kemi's efforts, that he is now clearly continuing to play it safe. He thinks that's the strategy, despite all the risks that are now blatant and apparent.
Yeah.
And he, if we look at the contradiction between what Robertson has said yesterday about, we are under attack, we're in peril, and our armed services, let alone the non-armed services, can't defend us.
Yeah.
But Starmer then comes to the dispatch box with a response in that fashion, says to me he thinks that he can continue to play it safe, and it's way too risky.
It's the opposite of playing it safe. I mean, it's genuinely terrifying. But also the credibility that this Prime Minister has, former human rights lawyer, saying, no, well, I don't agree with the former Defence Secretary, the former Secretary General, and the man who I thought was enough of an expert that he should carry out my own strategic defence review. But I know more than him. I mean, that's not going to fly.
No, it's not going to fly because he's not just going against Robertson now and a whole cohort of senior officers. It's not just Tim Collins and the scary colonels now. All of the senior officers are saying the same, and he's not listening to them. Now, this is the salient point: is our adversaries know damn well what this is and isn't, and they can play it at will, as and when they please.
Yeah.
You know, so his position now, when not acting decisively today, post what Robertson said yesterday, actually puts us in, as Robertson said, peril.
Absolutely. David, really appreciate that. Let me get some of your texts and tweets coming in about Britain being predicted by the IMF to suffer the biggest economic shock in the G7 from the Iran energy crisis. Rachel Reeves, though, blaming Trump's folly, in her words, instead of, the reality of net zero and Labour's failures in terms of economic policy. Vera says she's not getting away with blaming the Iran war for her disastrous economic failures. Economic growth was already tanking before the war and would be without it. Her gaslighting is not going to wash. Cole says, I'm sure Rachel from Accounts is happy she has Trump to blame. She realised the blame the Tories excuse was wearing a bit thin now. And Tony says Labour needs to be removed from office now. Time to drill, drill, drill. And Mark says the hypocrisy. Trump is the one that gave them sound advice to reopen the North Sea for drilling again so that the UK isn't held to ransom by countries that want to see the West fall. And Robert says our economy was suffering from a Labour-induced crisis long before Trump decided to attack Iran. Reeves and the rest of Labour are just trying to blame the outcomes of their mistakes on Trump's decisions. I mean, Claire Vessel, I think our lot got it. Why is it that our audience understands this really basic stuff better than the Prime Minister, the economics, people in the Treasury, the Chancellor herself, and indeed, the Welfare Secretary, the Energy Secretary, the Defence Secretary? Why do we all get it and they don't? Are they all just? I mean, they just got their fingers in their ears.
Yeah, they do, and they like to think that they know best and that they're right. And of course, they only speak to each other who reinforce that. Whereas your listeners and indeed guests on your show are much more sensible, have much more reality with the real world.
Absolutely.
And more contact with people.
Actual normal people, indeed. 12:33 is the time. Well, we're going to be talking to one of those people up next. So Ian Duncan Smith. Get his thoughts on what just happened. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, Claire Pearsall still here, and we're joined right now by former Conservative Party leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith MP. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Afternoon, Julia.
How are you? Did you watch PMQs?
I did. I was in the chamber. I
I'm sorry about that. You had to sit through the whole thing.
No, I didn't. You did. I didn't miss anything. I'm sure.
I only subject my audience to a very shorter section in it because I like them too much. Basically, it's as simple as that. I mean, it's Prime Minister's questions. It's rarely Prime Minister's answers, as per usual. Frankly, whoever is Prime Minister, you've been the man asking the questions. I think the general view is that Kemi Badenoch went on the right topic in terms of defence, but answer came there not. What do you make of the Prime Minister saying quite simply he does not agree with Lord Robertson, a former NATO Secretary-General, a former Defence Secretary, the man who wrote his own Strategic Defence Review only a year ago? He said he doesn't agree that we're in peril and we need to spend more on defence.
Well, it's interesting. First of all, the Prime Minister was terrible today because at one point the Speaker had to intervene on him to remind him it's Prime Minister's questions, not a statement, because he was rabbiting on. And I think the more he rabbits on, the more nervous he appears. In other words, talk, but nothing in it. Kemi was absolutely right to ask this question because this is the most important question for government. Defence of the realm, number one. Now, it's very interesting. He then says he doesn't agree with Robertson, but he commissioned Robertson to write the Defence Review. And they accepted the Defence Review when Robertson had finally published it. Yeah. So they didn't then say they didn't agree with Robertson. Yeah. What Lord Robertson has now reminded them was that they had obligations under that Defence Review to both spend more and do it more efficiently, but most importantly, quickly. And what he's now noticed is that they're not spending the money. In fact, in the last financial year, ended on the 1st of April, the government actually, under the Chancellor, took £2.6 billion out of the defence budget. And this is the problem, because she's looking for short-term money right now because she's in such a mess. And this is actually before the attack on Iran. So they can't blame the Iranian position. Lord Robertson's talking about where they are now, and Iran is a fact of life. And we aren't in the game. Why? Because we simply cannot defend our islands anymore. You know, ships tied up in port, all this stuff. So all he's doing is saying, you promised that you would spend more, do more, and do it well. And you haven't done any of that.
Exactly. Now, it's a fair point, as the Prime Minister made. I don't make this an entire review of PMQs. We've just done that. But he made... It is a fair point. Under the Conservatives, you know, they did actually massively cut defence, this so-called during peace dividend that actually was no longer there, certainly after the invasion of Crimea in 2014 and then the full-on invasion afterwards of the full country. I mean, you know, clearly wake-up call, and the Tories didn't act sooner. To your credit, you were talking about spending more through a lot of that period. But one of the key points Lord Robertson made was, you know, we've got a ballooning welfare budget. It's more than 5 times the defence budget. You can't have a defence budget going up if you've got a ballooning welfare budget. And that welfare budget is going sky high, and it did so from 2020 onwards, with with basically everyone just being put on the payroll during lockdown. Now, you were welfare work and pension secretary. You did actually seriously tackle welfare dependency, particularly among working age families. We were going in the right direction, slowly, but going in the right direction. We are going absolutely in the wrong direction. Have been for quite a few years now. I mean, we're 2026. We're 6 years on from the first lockdown. How much do you think we could realistically cut from that welfare budget if, you know, Labour backbenchers weren't wringing their hands and thinking that every single 20-year-old who claims they've got anxiety couldn't possibly go to work? What could we realistically cut from that £300 billion plus bill?
Well, the Centre for Social Justice has put out a plan for how you'll bring this under control. The first thing to be said about it, when I was doing it, we got the lowest number of workless households since records began, and we had a falling budget, not in proportionate terms, a rising budget, about 30 billion lower than was forecast as a result. But that was because of the reforms that we brought in and changed the nature of where these claims came from. No question, COVID punched a hole through all of that. I wasn't in government at that stage. I might have done things slightly differently, but I'm not going to sit there and talk about that. So what happened, it all spiraled then directly after COVID. It's been more difficult to get people into work because very many people start to get conditioned to the idea that you can just carry on welfare. The biggest areas of problem for the government are in the claims on mental health. So the 2 biggest claims on the sickness benefit side of it, which is worth a huge amount of money, are depression and anxiety. Now, those 2 areas are very treatable. And what's the best treatment for them? All the medical people say so is work. So getting them back into work and not paying them the extra money is one of the things the CSJ's talked about, where you will then save that money, reinvest it in support for them while they go into work.
I do wonder who would want to employ those people, though. I've got to be honest with you. If I had a couple of applicants for a job and one of them was someone who's been off work for depression and anxiety, I know we're not supposed to say this out loud, but I think I'd be doing what most employers would be doing, would be not hiring that person.
Well, the interesting thing is, though, once you get them back into work, the depression and anxiety starts to go. So work is critical to this. If you're sitting on your couch every day watching TV, you may have been depressed the week before, but you're even more depressed now because it's depressing. You have no purpose to your life. And that's why all the medical people, the NHS says work is a treatment.
But okay, if we're in economic doldrums...
That would save you, the plan that we put forward would save significant sums of money. And the CSJ has said that you can save between 20 and 30 billion off reforming the system so that these people get back to work and are supported in work to begin with so that they're able to do it. You'd save the money on them, and you'd also be able to get better treatment for people so they can get straight back into work. So these things are doable, and they're doable right now, but the government has not taken any of that.
But they've also got a bunch of Labour backbenchers. They could get through any policy they wanted, but they couldn't even get through not even a £5 billion cut, but a £5 billion reduction in the amount that the welfare bill was going to go up last year.
It was tiny.
They couldn't even get that through.
Theirs was just a top slice, which doesn't work anyway because it.
But if they can't do that, they're not going to be able to reform.
I think they'd have been better off trying to persuade their backbenchers that they're changing it and reforming it to make it better, so that people can do this. That's the way you make real savings that stay, because you change the nature of the demand factor. So, and the other thing was, on that small amount of money, they had about 50 Labour MPs who said they wouldn't vote for it, vote against it. They could still have got it through. There's the irony. They have 170-something majority. You know, they could have got it through. They panicked and they stepped back from it. Now, you're not allowed to talk about welfare reform in the Labour government because they've given up on that.
But you're not basically going to solve our economic problems in this country unless we do solve that.
Well, Lord Robertson is a Labour peer, a very strong, staunch one. You're quite right. The spending on defence went down, but it went down from the end of Mrs. Thatcher's rules for every government of every stripe, because everybody thought we wouldn't have another threat like this. And now we're facing the greatest threat we faced since
the world has changed. Well, what do you make also? I mean, the impact of the Iran conflict, I mean, comes on top of the Ukraine conflict, comes on top of lockdowns. We're going to face the biggest economic shock in the G7 nations from the Iran energy crisis. And the reason why we're going to do that, we've been forecasts have been downgraded by 0.5 percentage points from 1.3 to 0.8. Either way, growth was going to be tepid and it's going to be worse. And per capita, as one of our economists has pointed out earlier, even lower than that, 0.3%. You actually allow for all the extra people in the country. But it's basically because of our reliance on gas imports, our lack of storage, and the lack of using that storage, and wheat growth as a result of that £30 billion tax rate from the Chancellor at the last budget. So these are all things which are actually within the control of the Chancellor. Maybe not any immediate ability to lose the net zero policies and suddenly have all that gas and oil. But absolutely, we are currently going in completely the wrong direction on that front. The Chancellor is currently in Washington, has talked about this is all down to Donald Trump's folly over the war. But the reality is, whether you agree with the Iran conflict or not and what America has done, Donald Trump is right on the net zero issue, the migration issue and all the other problems that we're facing here. Do you think that the government would do well to actually listen a bit more to Donald Trump?
The IMF have ruled the UK is in the worst position of every country in the developed world. I mean, you think about that for a second. That is every country in Europe, across the United States and Canada, all parts of the areas of the world that are developed. We are the worst. Why are we the worst? Because we put all our eggs in one basket, which is a disaster for any government. In other words, we've said we're going to go for net zero regardless of the cost. Now, net zero, we are less than 1% of global emissions of carbon, if that's their target. And yet, we want to go completely for net zero, so we've done things which are really stupid. We have oil and gas. We have an island that sits on oil and gas and the North Sea as well. So the whole idea that we stop drilling, we don't want to drill anymore, we don't want to use the gas, is really stupid. Here we are buying expensive liquid gas from Norway. Just in case anybody has forgotten, Norway is just across the North Sea from us.
It's mind-blowing.
Where are they getting their gas from? the North Sea. What are they doing? They're turning it into liquid gas, expensive, by the way. That's charged to us. They then ship it on board boats, sometimes in pipelines, but generally on board boats, over to the UK. We have to take it apart and put it into our system. Expensive, by the way, as well. And so all of this is being done from very close to the fields that we would already be doing it. And all we would do then, which is why all this stuff about the gas price, the global gas price, we can't affect that. We can affect something called our domestic gas price.
Yep.
Because we wouldn't need to turn it to LNG. We wouldn't need to unpackage it as LNG. We wouldn't need to ship it on huge ships from the Middle East and wherever, expensive. We would just stick it into the pipeline and send it straight into the domestic.
And we'd have the tax receipts instead of those tax receipts going to Norway or America or wherever else. Ian, it's genuinely painful every time we talk about this stuff that the reality has not yet hit. Someone needs a very large wet fish to slap the Energy Secretary with to wake him up from this madness. But there we are. I don't think we're going to manage it today. Sir Ian Douglas-Smith, MP, former Conservative Party leader, thank you very much. A quick word from Claire Pearsall.
Yeah, it's really interesting talking about welfare reform, because obviously when Sir Ian was in the Department for Work and Pensions, we had the issue of the bedroom tax. And do you remember how much grief we got from people?
It wasn't a bedroom tax.
It wasn't a tax. That's what I keep saying. It wasn't a tax. It was a subsidy, and it needed to go. But the problem is the Labour government have now run out of political capital, so any decisions they made are going to be unpopular, and you can't just barrel it through and hope for the best, because they've burnt all their bridges with things like inheritance tax on farmers and winter fuel allowance on old people.
It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, folks. Happy Wednesday, everybody. 12:48 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to your favourite of mine, former Met Police Detective Peter Blexley, about the families involving this awful Wimbledon prep school crash, which cost 2 children's lives, saying that the police showed unconscious bias towards the driver because she was basically a well-off white woman. We're also going to be talking about the latest on those migrant scams to pretend that they're gay so they can gain asylum here. This is Talk. Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
This is a Talk exclusive. We've been looking at... I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:51 is the time. Let's talk about, well, something completely different right now with Peter Blaxley. I don't know why I've renamed you there, Peter. Former Metropolitan Police Detective. A very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you.
Thank you for joining us. A couple of things I want to talk to you about, but in particular, it's a fascinating story that the accusation from families of these, it was terrible, so these two little girls that were killed, as is Nuria Sajjad and Selina Lau, both 8 years old, who died when a Land Rover Defender, they ain't cheap, veered off the road, smashing through a fence into the study prep school at Wimbledon back in July 2023. It was an end-of-term picnic. Killed those two little girls. And the police did not charge the driver. There's a new investigation ongoing. And now an investigation into 11 Scotland Yard officers for their failure to carry out a proper probe. But police, their relatives say, were biased towards the driver who killed the little girls because she was a well-off, wealthy white woman and she was driving a 70 grand car, so she couldn't possibly be a criminal. What do you make of this? Because it's all rested on whether or not she was in control of her vehicle at the time. She claims, with no medical history, that she had some sort of seizure and has no recollection of sort of smashing through a fence and ploughing into these children. What do you make of it all?
In 1999, the Macpherson report was famously published, which for the first time branded the Metropolitan Police as being institutionally racist. Baroness Casey's report of not so long ago branded the organisation exactly the same.
Yeah.
But in the last quarter of a century, the Metropolitan Police has made some progress, granted, but it has launched numerous race action plans. It has spent millions of pounds on diversity and equality and inclusion training and the such like. And yet here we are, should these allegations be found to be true, and the investigation will no doubt take some time.
Yeah.
If they are found to be true, then where has the Met got itself? Basically, back to square one.
Yeah. And again, just judge everyone on the basis of, of what the facts are. I mean, this interesting thing, this woman, again, I have a funny feeling if she'd been a young man of any ethnicity driving this very fast, very expensive car and crashed into these kids, I think she probably would have been charged with the crime of dangerous driving. And present for death by dangerous driving is what they're now saying that the CPS is considering for the driver. The driver's called Claire Fremantle, but she wasn't charged with any offence. She said she had an epileptic seizure. It was the first one she'd had. She has no recollection of the crash. But I suppose there's an element where, your average, middle-aged woman, well-to-do middle-aged woman is not going around driving like a lunatic and crashing her car and killing two little children on a school playing field. So I suppose you are going to give the benefit of the doubt, whereas if it was, some boy racer in a fast car, you might not give the benefit of the doubt. Do you think that's probably a not unreasonable assumption based on playing the odds that a lot of police officers would give?
In an investigation like this, you should be able to discount any element of doubt. And I'll tell you why. The vehicle like that will undoubtedly have been fitted with state-of-the-art telematics, which give you a complete rundown on how the vehicle was being driven, the speed, acceleration, braking, and much, much more. The person who was arrested must surely have been tested for alcohol or for drugs.
Yeah.
That must have happened. If it didn't, then that would be a gross oversight, neglectful oversight by the investigation. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Witnesses would surely have been obtained who could have given eyewitness accounts of exactly what was happening. So there really shouldn't be an element of doubt in this investigation whatsoever if thorough, professional and prompt detective techniques have been applied.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just want justice to be done on both sides. She may well be entirely and a terrible victim herself of having caused, I can't imagine living with causing the deaths of two little 8-year-old girls. But of course, families who've lost those little girls, our hearts go out to them. And if they feel that justice hasn't been done, they've got an entitlement to it. So we'll wait and see that result. Let me also ask about another story we've been talking about today. And this is a BBC investigation, which I've been saying all day, and not with necessarily my tongue in my cheek a lot of the time, that must definitely make the BBC far-right bigots, because apparently they've discovered that not all asylum seekers are legitimate. We're talking about people here who have come here with a visa legally, either working or as a student, and then suddenly decide they want to be able to stay. They go into the asylum process, but they need a case for staying, and often the case they use is, I'm gay, I'm a gay man, I can't possibly go back to my very conservative country, I'll be persecuted. And we've now got what the BBC call a shadow industry of law firms and advisors in charities, often, by the way, paid for by the state, who are charging thousands of pounds to these migrants to basically provide them with documentation, to provide them with evidence, to prove that they are actually gay and therefore at risk if they are sent abroad. There's no doubt at all these people are all committing a serious criminal offence. The government has said anyone found to be involved in this on either side should be prosecuted, but this has been an open secret for quite some time, hasn't it?
And who's going to carry out those investigations? Yes. I've very much got my detective head on today.
Yeah.
It's very easy to deal with these kind of matters if the government was robust enough to do it. For example, every person applying for asylum who claims to be gay, sit them down in a room on their own and let them take a psychometric test.
Yep.
These can be drawn up relatively easily with a series of questions. It can be exhaustive, and at the end of it, when they are analysed, you will be able to get an accurate picture as to whether or not somebody is telling the truth. In other words, are they gay or are they...
Couldn't we just, with all due respect, couldn't we just put them in front of a porn video featuring women, or featuring women, and then and test their heart rate?
I thought that my attitude and ideas were somewhat robust, but I think they'll stand up to scrutiny a bit more, perhaps, Julia, than your plan.
Well, I don't know. It seems to me to be not an unreasonable thing to suggest. But this is the thing. The main thing is these things. It's like the people, the migrants who are, basically marrying somebody to get a visa. This has all been happening. It's happening in plain sight. A load of people who supposedly, honest lawyers and charities have been allowing this to happen. And even in the BBC report, they're kind of making out these people are victims. It's almost like they're being exploited by these people who are charged them thousands of pounds. But it's their choice.
Yes, it is. And, of course, we need to remind ourselves that the lawyers' fees, invariably, the tests of any of these people, and their accommodation, and their clothing, and their food, and so on and so forth, will be paid for by the taxes of you, of me, and your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. It always ends with that, doesn't it, Peter Blex? It's always so good to talk to you. Former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter there. Claire Pearce. I mean, you were at the Home Office. This was ever thus.
Absolutely. And we need more Peters, don't we, back in the police